Blood smears across subway tile, and Zoe Mercer realizes the sleeping man whose head rested on her shoulder 4 weeks ago is about to kill someone in front of 300 witnesses. Seojun Han stands motionless in the center of the platform, black coat still dripping rain, eyes locked on the armed men blocking her path home. The controlled heir to New York's most dangerous crime empire has just become something else entirely, something built from fire and broken glass. One of the attackers grabs for Zoe's arm. Seojun moves. If you want to know how an invisible waitress becomes the one thing a mafia king cannot afford to lose, follow this story to the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Okay. The subway smelled like wet wool and stale coffee, the way it always did on Tuesday nights when the city exhaled its workers into metal tubes beneath the streets. Zoe Mercer stood pressed against the center pole, one hand gripping the cold steel, while the other clutched a canvas bag filled with bruised apples she'd bought from the corner market because they were half price after 9. 26 years old and invisible. That was the trade she'd made with New York. Anonymity in exchange for survival. Her feet ached inside cheap sneakers that needed replacing 2 months ago. The double shift at the event company had run 4 hours past schedule because some hedge fund manager's 50th birthday party required servers to stand perfectly still while holding champagne trays until their arms went numb. Zoe had smiled through it. She smiled through everything now. Smiling was part of the uniform, like the black pants that showed every wrinkle and the white button-down shirt she hand-washed in her bathroom sink because laundromats cost money she couldn't spare. The train lurched forward and her bag tilted. One of the apples rolled out before she could catch it, bouncing across the scuffed floor in a lazy arc that seemed to slow time itself. It stopped against a pair of polished black shoes. Zoe's breath caught. The shoes belonged to a man sitting alone despite the crowded car. Alone because the 3 empty seats surrounding him created an invisible barrier nobody dared cross. He wore a black suit tailored so precisely it looked like armor, the kind of expensive simplicity that screamed power without needing to raise its voice. Dark hair swept back from a face too young to carry the weight of authority that radiated from him like heat from asphalt. Maybe 30, maybe younger. The tattoos creeping up from his collar suggested a history written in ink and bad decisions. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Dark, unreadable, and currently fixed on the bruised apple resting against his shoe like an accusation. Nobody else on the train looked at him directly. Zoe noticed that now. Passengers stared at their phones, at advertisements for injury lawyers and English language classes, at anything except the man who sat surrounded by 2 others in dark suits, bodyguards who watched the doors with the mechanical precision of people trained to see threats in empty hands. The man bent slowly and picked up the apple. His fingers were long, scarred across the knuckles in ways that didn't come from office work. When he straightened, his gaze found Zoe through the crowd like a spotlight cutting through smoke. She should look away. Every survival instinct learned from 26 years in a city that ate people whole told her to break eye contact, mumble an apology, fade back into the anonymous mass of bodies swaying with the train's rhythm. Instead, she stepped forward. "Sorry," Zoe said, reaching for the apple. It escaped. His mouth almost curved. Almost. That happens. His voice carried the faint trace of an accent she couldn't place, something buried beneath perfect English, a ghost of somewhere else. He held the apple between them like an offering. Their fingers brushed when she took it. For one suspended second, the entire subway car disappeared. Just skin against skin, warm and real and impossibly intimate for an accidental touch between strangers on public transportation. Zoe felt her pulse kick up in her throat. The man's eyes narrowed slightly as though he'd noticed. Then the moment broke. Zoe shoved the apple back into her bag and retreated to her spot against the pole, face burning. Around her, the other passengers continued their deliberate ignorance, but she felt the weight of those dark eyes following her until the train screeched into the next station and half the car emptied. She should have gotten off. Should have walked the extra 12 blocks in the rain rather than stay in proximity to someone who made hardened New Yorkers create unconscious distance. But her feet hurt, and the apartment waiting for her was cold, and sometimes exhaustion won over common sense. Zoe closed her eyes and counted stops. At some point between Lexington and Union Square, the quality of silence in the car changed. Zoe opened her eyes to find the crowd thinned to maybe 24 people. most of them slumped in their seats with the glazed expression of workers ground down by the city's machinery. The man in the black suit still sat 3 feet away. His bodyguards had shifted positions, standing now near the doors with military posture. But the man himself had changed. His head tilted back against the subway window, eyes closed, jaw tight even in rest. The controlled perfection from earlier had cracked just enough to show exhaustion underneath, the kind that lived in bone marrow and turned sleep into a luxury rather than a routine. Zoe recognized it. She wore the same exhaustion every day. The train rocked through a curve, and the man swayed slightly, unconsciously, pulled by momentum. His shoulder drifted toward Zoe like a compass finding north. She should move, should shift away, put distance between herself and whoever this man was, because people didn't get bodyguards for selling insurance or teaching elementary school. The expensive suit and careful tattoos and controlled violence radiating from his stillness all pointed to the kind of life Zoe had spent years avoiding. The train lurched again. His head came to rest against her shoulder. Zoe froze. The two bodyguards turned immediately, hands moving toward concealed weapons with the fluid speed of professionals. But the man's breathing had already evened out into the deep rhythm of genuine sleep, his weight settling against her like trust made physical. One of the bodyguards, early 40s, Korean, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, met Zoe's eyes across the car. She watched him make a calculation in real time, weighing the threat of a tired waitress in secondhand clothes against the apparent peace on his employer's face. Finally, the bodyguard gave her a single small nod and stepped back. Permission, or maybe warning. Zoe couldn't tell which, so she stood there, one hand still gripping the center pole, the other clutching her bag of bruised apples, while the most dangerous-looking man she'd ever encountered slept against her shoulder for 4 subway stops like someone who hadn't felt safe in years. His breathing was steady, warm against her collar. Occasionally his hand twitched, fingers flexing around invisible weapons or phantom threats. But he didn't wake. Around them, the remaining passengers maintained their careful blindness. This was New York. People saw impossible things every day and learned to file them under "not my problem" before the train reached the next station. Zoe stared at the dark window across from her, watching her own reflection trapped between the man's sleeping face and the tunnel walls blurring past. She looked exactly like what she was, exhausted, underpaid, and currently serving as a pillow for someone who probably had people killed over unpaid debts. The rational part of her brain screamed to wake him, to step away, to remember that fairy tales about powerful men noticing ordinary women always ended with the ordinary woman learning exactly why power and proximity made terrible combinations. But he looked so completely peaceful. And Zoe understood loneliness well enough to recognize it in someone else's sleep. When the train finally pulled into her stop, the bodyguard with the scarred eyebrow cleared his throat softly. The sound cut through the subway's ambient noise like a blade through silk. The man stirred, consciousness returning in slow degrees, first a tension in his shoulders, then his fingers curling into fists, then his eyes opening to find himself using a stranger as furniture. He pulled back immediately, something like shock flashing across his face before control slammed down over it. "Sorry," he said quietly. The word came out rough, unpracticed, like apologies weren't part of his usual vocabulary. Zoe shrugged, trying to make it casual. "That happens?" His eyes sharpened with recognition. She'd thrown his own words back at him. For one moment, she watched him decide how to respond. Then the corner of his mouth lifted in something that might have been a smile on someone who remembered how. "It doesn't," he said. "Thank you." The doors opened. Zoe stepped onto the platform without looking back, letting the crowd absorb her into its anonymous flow. Behind her, she felt those dark eyes tracking her movement until the train pulled away and carried him deeper into the city. She didn't think about it on the walk home. Didn't let herself analyze the weight of his head against her shoulder, or the way his bodyguards had let him sleep through 4 stops without interference. She climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, unlocked the door with the key that stuck unless you pulled while turning, and dropped her bag beside the sink where unpaid bills created a paper mountain she'd been avoiding for weeks. The radiator rattled but produced no heat. The fridge hummed with concerning irregularity. Everything smelled faintly of the Indian restaurant 2 floors down, cumin and frying oil permanently baked into the building's walls. This was her life. This was safety. This was invisible. Zoe ate a bruised apple standing at the kitchen counter and told herself she'd already forgotten the man on the train. She was a terrible liar. 3 days passed before Zoe saw him again. The event company called Friday morning with an assignment she almost refused: private dinner service at an exclusive restaurant in Manhattan. The kind of place that didn't have a sign outside because people who needed signs weren't invited. 8-hour shift, black tie service standards, and a pay rate exactly high enough to make refusing impossible. Zoe said yes because her landlord had started leaving voicemails. The restaurant occupied the second floor of a Tribeca brownstone, converted into the kind of luxury that felt like a secret. Zoe arrived through the kitchen entrance at 4:30, already dressed in the required uniform. Black dress, sensible heels, hair pulled back so severely it gave her a headache. The other servers moved with the choreographed efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times, setting tables with geometric precision while the chef screamed at a sous who'd oversalted something. "Tonight's a big one," Claudia said, appearing beside Zoe with a tray of champagne flutes. Claudia worked events full-time, had for 7 years, and treated every job like preparation for some future promotion that would never come. Private party, very private. No phones, no questions, no staring. "Who's the client?" Zoe asked, adjusting the apron that made her feel like a costume version of herself. Claudia's expression went carefully blank. "Doesn't matter, just serve, smile, and pretend you're furniture." Which was Zoe's specialty anyway. The guests started arriving at 7. Zoe watched them through the small kitchen window. Men mostly. Expensive suits and cold eyes. The kind who walked like they owned cities. A few women scattered throughout, beautiful and hard in equal measure. Security stationed themselves at every doorway, not bothering to hide the earpieces or the bulges under their jackets. Whoever hosted this dinner didn't worry about discretion. Zoe carried the first course out at 7:15, some delicate fish thing that cost more than her monthly rent. She moved between tables with the practiced invisibility of service work, setting plates down without interrupting conversations about shipping routes and territory disputes and other subjects that stopped abruptly whenever she approached. She was refilling water glasses at the corner table when she felt it. That same spotlight sensation from the subway, cutting through the dim restaurant lighting to pin her in place. Zoe's hand trembled slightly. Water sloshed against the rim of a glass. She finished pouring with mechanical precision, then turned. He sat at the head table, surrounded by 4 other men who deferred to him with every gesture. The black suit was different, but just as perfectly tailored. His hair was swept back, revealing the strong lines of his face and the ink creeping up the left side of his neck. Dragons or snakes or something that moved like violence when he shifted position. Seojun Han. She'd learned his name from Claudia's too-quick response when Zoe asked who was being served first. His eyes locked on her across the candlelit room with the same unsettling precision from the train. This time, she couldn't pretend it was accidental. This time, recognition lived in his gaze like a question he'd already answered. Zoe looked away first, retreating to the kitchen with her empty pitcher and hammering pulse. "You okay?" Claudia asked, loading her tray with the second course. "Fine," Zoe lied. "Just warm." Through the service window, she watched Seojun lean back in his chair, while the man beside him spoke urgently in Korean. He nodded occasionally, but his attention kept drifting toward the kitchen entrance like a compass pulled off true north. The dinner lasted 3 hours. Zoe served 5 courses, refilled countless drinks, and cleared plates while conversations washed over her in multiple languages. The security never relaxed, the guests never laughed. Everything felt like business, even the food. And through it all, Seojun watched her with the patience of someone who'd learned waiting was its own weapon. When dessert service finished, and the guests began leaving in careful intervals, Zoe escaped to the small back hallway where servers stacked dirty dishes and hid from management. Her feet screamed inside heels that had rubbed her ankles raw. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, counting down the minutes until she could collect her pay and disappear into the subway system. "You're good at that." Zoe's eyes snapped open. Seojun stood 3 feet away, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a matte black business card. He'd approached silently despite leather shoes on tile floor, another skill that didn't come from corporate boardrooms. "At what?" Zoe asked, hating how her voice came out rough. "Disappearing in plain sight." He studied her with that same unsettling focus from the train. "But you're not invisible. You never were." "I need to get back to work. You're off the clock." He checked his watch. Expensive, mechanical. Probably worth more than everything Zoe owned combined. Service ended 4 minutes ago. How did he know her schedule? How long had he been watching? Seojun extended the card. You don't have to call, but if you need something, anything, use it. Zoe stared at the card without taking it. Just a phone number, no name, no explanation. Why would I need anything from you? Because you work 3 jobs, live in a 4th floor walk-up in Queens with broken heating, and eat discount fruit for dinner. His voice stayed even, factual, like he was reading from a report. Because New York is expensive and invisible people still need help sometimes. The accuracy punched air from her lungs. You had me investigated. I had you protected. The distinction mattered to him. She heard it in the careful way he shaped the words. There's a difference. No, Zoe said, finding her anger through the shock. There really isn't. She pushed past him, ignoring the card, ignoring the way his cologne, something dark and cedar sharp, cut through the restaurant's ambient smell of wine and extinguished candles. Behind her, she felt him watching, patient and immovable as stone. The train, he said quietly, stopping her at the kitchen door. You could have moved, could have woken me. Most people would have. Zoe looked back. Most people aren't that tired. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or the closest thing to surprise his controlled face allowed. He slipped the card into his jacket without comment, nodded once, and walked back toward the dining room where his security waited like satellites around a dark star. Zoe collected her pay, changed clothes in the bathroom, and took the subway home while her hands shook with adrenaline and confusion in equal measure. She told herself it was over, that rich, dangerous men didn't actually pursue exhausted waitresses beyond satisfying whatever curiosity made them generous for an evening, that by tomorrow, Seojun Han would forget the woman who'd let him sleep on her shoulder while the city rattled past. She was still a terrible liar. The black Mercedes appeared outside her apartment building on Sunday morning. Zoe noticed it immediately because her street didn't do Mercedes. Her street did beat-up Hondas and delivery vans with permanent parking tickets. The car sat directly across from her building's entrance, engine idling, windows tinted black enough to violate every traffic law. She walked past it on her way to the laundromat, pretending not to notice. It was still there when she came back 90 minutes later, dragging a rolling cart filled with damp clothes because her building's dryer ate quarters without producing heat. The pattern continued for 3 days. Black car, different locations. Always within sight of wherever Zoe happened to be. The grocery store, the subway entrance, the event company's midtown office. On Wednesday, flowers arrived. Not a bouquet. A single white orchid in a black ceramic pot, delivered to her apartment by a courier who wouldn't meet her eyes. No card, no explanation, just a flower that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Zoe put it on the fire escape, where it immediately began dying from February cold. Thursday brought a second orchid. Friday, a third. By Saturday, her fire escape looked like a memorial garden, 5 pristine flowers freezing to death outside a 4th floor Queens walk-up. She didn't call the number on the card she'd refused, didn't acknowledge the surveillance that had become routine. Didn't give any sign that she noticed the way her subway rides had become suspiciously smooth, delays clearing up seconds before she arrived, crowded cars somehow having open seats exactly where she stood. Invisible people learned not to make waves. But Sunday morning, the black car pulled up while Zoe was leaving for her brunch shift at the event company, and the back door opened. "Get in," Claudia said from inside the car. Zoe's blood went cold. "What?" "Please," Claudia added, and her voice carried a tremor Zoe had never heard in 7 years of working together. "Just get in." The driver stared straight ahead. The engine purred. On the sidewalk, a jogger passed without slowing, headphones in, ignorant of the small drama unfolding in a car worth more than the building beside it. Zoe got in. The interior smelled like leather and something sharper, fear maybe, or whatever emotion lived in Claudia's rigid posture and white-knuckled hands. The door closed with the soft, expensive sound of German engineering. They pulled into traffic smoothly, heading west toward Manhattan. "What's happening?" Zoe asked. Claudia stared at her lap. "I fucked up. Claudia, that last month. That dinner party in Soho. The tech investor's birthday. Claudia's voice cracked. One of the guests offered me $5,000 for information about the next private dinner. Who was attending? What time? What security looked like? Zoe's stomach dropped. Please tell me you didn't. I needed the money. My mom's medical bills. Claudia stopped, swallowed hard. I didn't think it mattered. Just one dinner, just names and times. What could anyone do with that? The car crossed the bridge into Manhattan, and Zoe understood with sick certainty where they were going. Friday's dinner, she said. The one Seo Jun Han attended. They were going to kill him. Claudia's tears started then, silent and desperate. That's what the information was for. Some rival group wanted to know exactly where he'd be and when. If I'd known. But you didn't know, Zoe said, hearing her own voice from somewhere distant. So what happened? He found out, before they could act. I don't know how, but he knew. Claudia finally looked at her, mascara streaking down her face in dark rivers. He came to my apartment last night, walked in through the locked door like locks were suggestions, just stood there in my kitchen and asked if I understood what I'd done. The car stopped outside the same Tribeca brownstone where Zoe had served dinner a week ago. Same unmarked entrance, same security stationed at the door. But now those guards looked at Zoe's face and stepped aside, granting her passage without question. He told me to bring you, Claudia whispered. Said you'd want to understand what happens next. Zoe didn't want to understand. Wanted to run, to disappear back into the city's anonymous mass where dangerous men didn't know her name or her schedule or the way she'd let one of them sleep against her shoulder. But the security guard held the door open, patient and immovable as stone. And Zoe had learned long ago that some currents were too strong to fight. She climbed the stairs. The private dining room looked different, empty. Larger, somehow, without guests filling the space. The tables had been cleared, chairs pushed back against the walls. In the center of the room stood Seo Jun, hands in his pockets, utterly calm. Behind him, two men knelt with hands bound, blood leaking from cuts on their faces. The men who'd tried to use Claudia's information to plan an assassination. Seo Jun's eyes found Zoe immediately. Thank you for coming. Like I had a choice, Zoe said, voice steadier than her pulse. You always have choices. He gestured toward the kneeling men without looking at them. These two made theirs. Claudia made hers. Now I'm making mine. Which is showing you what my world looks like. What happens when people get close to me without understanding the consequences? Seo Jun finally turned to face the bound men. His bodyguards flanked him, silent and ready. Your friend sold information that would have gotten me killed. The men who bought it are here because I believe in thorough research. One of the kneeling men spat blood onto the floor. Fuck you, Han. Seo Jun didn't react. In my business, betrayal earns very specific responses, permanent ones. Stop, Zoe said. He looked at her, expression unreadable. This isn't your concern. Then why am I here? Because I wanted you to see what you're close to. His voice stayed level, but something sharp lived underneath. What happens in proximity to me? What I do when someone threatens what's mine? Claudia isn't yours. I'm not yours. No, Seo Jun agreed. But you were standing in my building, serving my guests, visible in spaces where visibility can get people killed. That makes you relevant. That makes you someone I need to protect or remove. The words landed like physical blows. Protect or remove. Two options, both stripping her of choice. What happens to Claudia? Zoe asked. Nothing. She was desperate and stupid, not malicious. I understand the difference. He nodded to one of his guards. She pays back the $5,000 over 2 years, no interest. She finds new work. I have something available if she wants it. She forgets she ever heard my name outside of news articles. And them? Zoe nodded toward the kneeling men. They knew the risks. One of the guards moved forward with a gun drawn, the motion casual and practiced. Zoe's breath stopped in her throat. This was it. This was the moment that would define whether she ran or stayed, whether she kept pretending she didn't notice the black cars and orchids and constant surveillance that had become routine. Wait, she heard herself say. Seo-jun raised one hand. The guard stopped immediately, gun still pointed at the floor. Everyone waited. The men, the guards, Claudia probably crying somewhere behind them. Zoe stepped forward until she stood between Seojun and the kneeling men. You wanted me to see your world. Fine, I'm seeing it. But if you do this now, you're just proving that world is exactly what I thought it was. Violence without choice, power without mercy. This is mercy, Seojun said quietly. They came at me. If I let them live, others will try. So let them try. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe anger, maybe something without a name. You're asking me to show weakness. I'm asking you to show me you're more than what everyone else sees. Zoe held his gaze, refusing to look away even as fear hummed in her bones. You said I could have called you, could have asked for anything, so I'm asking now. Don't make me watch this. The silence stretched, pulling tight as wire. Behind Seojun, his guards waited for orders that didn't come. The kneeling men breathed hard through broken faces, watching their own lives hang suspended in the space between Zoe's words and Seojun's response. Finally, Seojun turned to his guards. Get them out of the city. Make sure they understand what happens if they come back. The guards moved with efficient speed, hauling the men to their feet and dragging them toward a back exit. No argument, no hesitation, just obedience to the man who changed his mind because an exhausted waitress asked him to. When the room emptied, Seojun studied Zoe with an expression she couldn't read. That was a mistake. Maybe, Zoe said, but it was mine. No. He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. It was ours, because now every person who sees me spare enemies will wonder if I've gone soft, and soft men die quickly in my business. Then why did you do it? The question hung between them, charged with everything unsaid, the subway, the dinner, the flowers dying on her fire escape, the surveillance that had become protection without her permission. Sojun's hand lifted, almost touching her face before he stopped himself. Because 4 weeks ago, you let a stranger sleep on your shoulder like he deserved safety, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about what kind of person does that. His hand dropped. He stepped back, putting careful distance between them. Go home, Zoe, he said. Forget tonight happened. Forget me. He turned away toward the windows overlooking the street where his car waited, where his empire spread through the city like roots through concrete. Zoe should have left then, should have run for the subway and her cold apartment and her invisible life. Instead, she said, What if I can't? Seojun stopped, his shoulders tense beneath the perfect suit. Then we're both in trouble, he said without turning around. And Zoe realized she'd stopped trying to disappear. Zoe didn't go home. She stood on the sidewalk outside the Tribeca brownstone for 20 minutes after leaving, staring at nothing while February wind cut through her jacket like it wasn't there. The black Mercedes idled at the curb, Seojun's driver waiting with the engine running, exhaust curling into the cold air. She could see him watching her in the side mirror, patient as stone. Finally, she walked. Not toward the subway, just walked. Manhattan at night had a specific rhythm. Cabs hunting fares, restaurants emptying their last customers, couples stumbling home drunk on overpriced cocktails, and the illusion that the city belonged to them. Zoe moved through it all like a ghost, her mind stuck on Seojun's last words. Then we're both in trouble. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't walk alone this late, Seojun's voice said when she answered. No greeting, no explanation for how he'd gotten her number. My driver will take you home. I need to think. Think in the car. Zoe stopped at a red light, watching her breath fog in the air. I need to not be watched for 5 fucking minutes. Silence on the line. Then, okay. The call ended. When Zoe glanced back, the Mercedes was gone. She made it 3 more blocks before realizing she was crying. Not the dramatic kind. Just tears leaking from her eyes while her face stayed blank. Her body walking on autopilot through streets that had stopped making sense. She'd asked a mafia boss to spare men who'd tried to kill him. He'd done it. And now something had shifted between them that couldn't be unshifted, some gravity that pulled whether she wanted it to or not. Zoe found herself at Washington Square Park, sitting on a frozen bench while NYU students passed in laughing clusters. Her phone buzzed again. A text this time, same unknown number. 3 of my men are in the area. You won't see them, but they're there. She should have been angry, should have typed back something sharp about boundaries and stalking and consent. Instead, she typed, "Thank you." The response came immediately. "Go home, Zoe, please." So she did. Took the subway to Queens, climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, and lay in bed fully clothed while the broken radiator rattled its useless song. Sleep didn't come. Neither did clarity. The event company called Monday morning with 3 assignments for the week. Zoe took them all even though her body begged for rest. Cocktail reception Wednesday, corporate luncheon Friday, another private dinner Saturday. Work meant money, and money meant survival, and survival was the only thing she'd ever been good at. Tuesday, another orchid arrived. This one came with a note written in precise handwriting. "These look better alive than dead." Like most things. Zoe put it inside this time, on the kitchen counter where weak sunlight struggled through the window. It seemed wrong to let it freeze. Wednesday's cocktail reception was at a midtown hotel, serving drinks to insurance executives who told the same jokes they'd probably been telling since the 90s. Zoe smiled, poured wine, and pretended her entire nervous system wasn't vibrating with awareness that somewhere in this city, Seo Jun Han was making decisions that bent reality around him. She made it until Thursday before breaking. The matte black card sat in her jacket pocket where she'd been carrying it for a week, worn soft at the edges from her fingers tracing it during subway rides. Zoe pulled it out at 2 in the morning, stared at the single phone number, and dialed before courage could desert her. He answered on the first ring. "Are you safe?" Not hello, not who is this, just immediate assessment of threat. "I'm fine," Zoe said. "I'm home. She stopped, unsure what came next. "You just what?" "I don't know. I don't know why I called." She heard him breathe on the other end. Background noise suggested he wasn't alone. Low conversation in Korean, the clink of glasses, music bleeding through from somewhere close. "Give me 10 minutes, he said, and hung up. Zoe sat on her worn couch, still holding the phone, wondering what the fuck she'd just done. 18 minutes later, someone knocked. She checked the peephole from habit. Seojun stood in the hallway looking exactly like someone who'd just walked out of whatever dangerous situation he'd been managing, suit jacket gone, white shirt rolled to his elbows, tattoos visible up both forearms in intricate patterns she couldn't read from this angle. He was alone. Zoe opened the door. "You came here," she said stupidly. "You called." He stayed in the hallway, not presuming entry. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, shadows under his eyes, jaw tight, the specific tension of someone who hadn't slept properly in days. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. Her apartment looked worse with him in it. The peeling paint suddenly glaring, the mismatched furniture obviously second-hand, the stack of unpaid bills beside the sink screaming poverty in a way that usually felt normal until compared to someone wearing a watch worth more than her annual income. Seojun didn't seem to notice. He looked at the orchids lined up on the counter, then at Zoe. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Do what?" "Whatever this is. You watching me. Me calling you at 2 a.m. Any of it." "Neither do I." He leaned against the wall by the door, keeping distance between them like he understood she needed space to think. "I've had 3 relationships my entire adult life. All arranged, all strategic, all ending when the women realized I'd never loved them more than the empire." The honesty landed like a punch. Zoe sat on the couch's arm, exhaustion making her bones heavy. "Why tell me that?" "Because you asked me to be more than what everyone sees. That requires context." "Context," Zoe repeated. "Right. Context like you running a criminal organization." "Yes." "Like having people beaten." "Yes." "Like making women disappear when they get too close." "No." His voice sharpened. "I've never hurt anyone who didn't hurt me first. The women left because they chose to. I didn't..." He stopped, jaw working. "I don't trap people, Zoe. You want to walk away, walk away. I'll call off the security. You'll never see me again." But I don't want you to." The words came out rough, unpracticed. "I sleep better near you than I have in 4 years. That matters. I don't know why, but it matters." Zoe's throat went tight. "That's not love. That's just exhaustion finding a comfortable pillow." "Maybe, but I want to find out which." He pushed off the wall, moving toward the door. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight, or tomorrow. Just keep the phone." Keep the security. Let me know you're safe while you figure out what you want. His hand touched the doorknob. Zoe heard herself say, "Stay." Sojun froze. She gestured at the couch. "It's late. You look like shit. Stay for a few hours." Zoe, no expectations, no drama, just sleep. She stood, suddenly too aware of how small her apartment was, how close they stood. Unless that's against mafia boss rules. His mouth almost smiled. There are no rules for this. So he stayed. Zoe gave him the couch, brought him a blanket that had seen better years, and retreated to her bedroom with her heart hammering against her ribs. She lay in the dark, listening to him move around her living room, the soft sound of his shoes coming off, the creak of old couch springs, the rustle of fabric settling. Then silence. Deep, steady breathing. He'd fallen asleep in under 5 minutes. Zoe stared at her ceiling and tried to understand what the fuck her life had become. Morning came gray and cold. Zoe woke to the smell of coffee and panic because she didn't own a coffee maker. She stumbled into the living room to find Seojun at her kitchen counter, dress shirt wrinkled, hair falling across his forehead, pouring from a French press she'd definitely never seen before. "You brought coffee equipment," she said. "I texted my assistant at 6. He delivered it at 7. Seojun handed her a mug. "You're out of milk." "I can't afford milk." The words came out before she could stop them. Seojun's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Calculation or pity or whatever emotion lived in the space between. "I'm not a charity case," Zoe added quickly. "I know, but you're also not obligated to refuse help out of pride." He sipped his own coffee, leaning against the counter in her tiny kitchen like he belonged there. "The job I mentioned for Claudia, it's real. Administrative work, decent salary, no connection to my other business. If you want it instead, I don't." "Why not?" "Because I need to know you're not trying to own me. That this, whatever this is, isn't about power or control or keeping track of another asset. It's not." He set down his mug with careful precision. "But I understand why you'd think that." They stood 3 feet apart in weak morning light, drinking coffee in her kitchen that barely fit one person, and Zoe realized this was the most honest conversation she'd had in years. "I have to get ready for work," she said finally. Seojun nodded, already moving toward the door. He'd put his shoes back on at some point, returned to being the controlled man in the expensive suit. Only his hair remained mussed, and even that looked intentional. At the door he paused. "Saturday's dinner. The one you're assigned to serve. What about it?" "Don't go." Her stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because tensions are escalating. The men I spared are connected to people who won't appreciate mercy. There's going to be fallout, and I don't want you near it. I need the money. I'll pay you double what you'd earn." "That's not—" Zoe bit back anger. "That's exactly what I meant about not being owned. This isn't about ownership. It's about the fact that someone tried to kill me last week. And violence breeds violence, and you asked me to spare men who are now going to be seen as weakness." His voice stayed level, but intensity leaked through. "Saturday's dinner will have half the city's crime leadership in one room. If something happens, then tell me not to come, as my employer, through official channels." "Zoe, I'm not your responsibility, Seojun. I'm not your girlfriend or your employee or whatever category you're trying to fit me into." She pulled the door open. "If you want me to make different choices, ask. Don't command." He stared at her for 3 long seconds, then nodded once and left without another word. Zoe made it to the shower before her hands started shaking. Friday's corporate luncheon passed in a blur. Saturday morning brought a text from the event company. Tonight's assignment canceled. Client requested different staff. Zoe stared at her phone and felt something between relief and rage. Seojun had gone around her, used his power to make her decision for her, wrapped it in clean corporate language so it looked like anything except what it was. She dialed his number. "I asked you not to," she said when he answered. "I know. You did it anyway." "Yes." "Why?" "Because if something happens to you because of choices I made, I won't forgive myself, and I don't have enough things worth protecting to risk losing one." His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before, something raw underneath the control. "Be angry. Call me a controlling asshole, but you're not working that dinner. Then I'm not working for your organization at all. Zoe said, and hung up. She turned her phone off, ignored the buzzing that started immediately, and spent Saturday night eating discount Thai food on her couch, while watching reality TV about people whose problems involved rose ceremonies instead of mafia politics. The orchid on her counter had started drooping. She gave it water and wondered if symbolic plants were trying to tell her something. Sunday, she turned her phone back on to 17 missed calls and 1 voicemail. Sojun's voice, "There was an incident at the dinner, 3 people hospitalized. A rival faction made a move. You were right to be angry about how I handled it, but you were also not there. So we're both going to live with our choices." The voicemail ended. Zoe played it again, listening for subtext, for blame, for the anger she'd earned by refusing protection. It wasn't there, just exhaustion and something that might have been relief. She called back. "I'm sorry," she said when he answered. "Don't be. You were right." Background noise suggested movement, a car maybe, or the ambient hum of wealth insulating people from the city's chaos. "I overstepped. I'm used to making decisions that keep people alive, and I'm not used to those people having veto power." "Did anyone die?" "No, but it was close." He paused. "Can I see you?" "When?" "Now, or whenever you're ready, or never, if that's what you need." Zoe looked around her empty apartment, at the unpaid bills and dying plant and the French press she hadn't asked for but had used every morning since he'd left it. "Come over," she said. He arrived 30 minutes later, looking like he'd been awake for 2 days straight. The suit was gone, replaced by dark jeans and a black sweater that made the tattoos on his neck stand out like warnings. He had a cut above his left eyebrow, newly bandaged, and his knuckles were scraped raw. "Jesus," Zoe said. "What happened?" The incident got handled. He stayed in her doorway again, not presuming anything. One of the rival underbosses decided to make his move during dinner service. He didn't know I'd changed the location at the last minute. Wrong restaurant, wrong staff, wrong security setup. It ended badly for him. "Were you there?" "Yes." "Did you—" She couldn't finish the question. "I defended myself and my people." That's all I'll say about it. His eyes met hers, steady and unapologetic. "You wanted to see what my world looks like. This is it. Violence that comes whether I want it or not, handled in ways that keep the people I care about breathing." Zoe stepped back, letting him in. He moved past her slowly, carefully, like sudden movement might spook her. "Show me," she said. "Show you what?" "The tattoos. The real story, not whatever sanitized version you tell curious civilians." Seojun's expression went carefully blank. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to keep letting you into my life, I need to know what I'm letting in." He studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled the sweater over his head in one smooth motion. The tattoos covered both arms, his chest, his ribs. Intricate patterns of dragons and snakes and symbols Zoe didn't recognize woven together in black ink that looked like violence made permanent. Some were beautiful. Some looked like they'd been done in prison or back rooms by people who specialized in marking ownership. "My father started these when I was 16, Seojun said, voice empty of emotion. "Every major decision, every alliance formed, every enemy eliminated. It got added to the collection. By the time he died, I was more ink than skin." Zoe reached out slowly, fingers hovering over a dragon on his left forearm. "Can I?" He nodded. She traced the pattern, feeling raised scar tissue beneath smooth ink. The dragon's scales were individual, precise, probably painful as fuck to sit through. "What does this one mean?" "First kill. I was 19. Someone came at my father, missed, got me instead." His voice stayed flat. "I didn't miss back." Her fingers moved to his ribs, where text in Korean wrapped around a snake eating its own tail. "And this?" "The oath I took when I inherited the organization. Roughly translates to empire before blood, meaning the business matters more than family, more than personal attachment, more than any individual life, including mine." Zoe pulled her hand back. "Do you believe that?" "I did. For a long time." He reached for his sweater, but she stopped him. "Wait." She moved closer, studying the ink across his chest. A phoenix, wings spread, rising from flames that licked toward his collarbones. This one looked newer than the rest, colors still vivid. "This one's different," she said. 6 months old. I added it after—" He stopped. After what? After realizing the Empire was going to kill me before any enemy got the chance, that I was burning from the inside out, and nobody noticed because I'd gotten too good at hiding it. His hand came up, covering hers where it rested against his chest. Then you let a stranger sleep on your shoulder, and I remembered what safety felt like. Zoe's breath caught. Under her palm, she could feel his heartbeat. Fast, unsteady, human, despite everything the tattoos proclaimed about violence and control. I'm scared, she admitted. Good. You should be. He didn't move, didn't try to close the distance between them. I'm dangerous, Zoe. Not because I want to be. Because that's what survival demanded, and I got very good at surviving. What if I can't handle it? Then you walk away, and I let you. No consequences, no retaliation, no black cars following you forever. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. But I think you're stronger than you know. People who survive invisibly in this city learn how to read danger, and you're still here. She was. Despite every rational instinct, despite the tattoos and violence and the kind of wealth that came from hurting people, she was standing in her kitchen with her hand on his chest while he looked at her like she was the only unpredictable thing in his controlled world. I don't know how to date a mafia boss, Zoe said. I don't know how to date anyone. We'll figure it out together. She laughed, surprising herself. That's the worst pitch I've ever heard. It's also honest. He stepped back, giving her space, pulling the sweater back on. I should go. You need to think, and I need to handle about 15 urgent situations before morning. Seojun. He stopped at the door, turning back. Next time you want to protect me from something, ask first, even if you think you know the answer. Deal. Next time you want to understand my world, ask questions, even if you think you don't want the answers. Deal. He left. Zoe stood in her apartment, hands still tingling from where she'd touched his ink-covered skin, and wondered what the fuck she was doing. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Seojun texted her most mornings, never anything presumptuous, just checking in. She responded sometimes, ignored him sometimes, slowly learning that he meant what he'd said about giving her space. The black cars disappeared. The orchids stopped coming. Whatever surveillance he'd maintained pulled back enough that Zoe could pretend she was still invisible. But she caught herself looking for him anyway. On subway platforms, in restaurant windows, in the shadows between streetlights where dangerous men stood watching the world pass. He called twice. Once to warn her about increased tensions in certain neighborhoods, she should avoid walking alone after dark near her usual subway stops. Once just to hear her voice. I'm in Seoul, he said during that second call. Handling family business. I'll be back Thursday. Okay, Zoe said, ignoring how her stomach dipped at the news. There's a gallery opening Friday night. Chelsea. Very public, very safe. He paused. Would you want to come? As what? As yourself. As someone I'd like to spend time with in a space that isn't your apartment or my crime scenes. She should have said no. Should have used the distance to rebuild boundaries that were already crumbling. Instead, she said, what's the dress code? Whatever you're comfortable in. I'll send a car at 7. I can take the subway. Zoe. His voice carried a smile. Let me send the car. It's New York in March. It's going to rain. He was right. Friday arrived cold and wet, the kind of weather that made Zoe's already shit hair impossible to manage. She wore the one dress she owned that didn't scream, broke waitress. Simple black, hem slightly frayed, paired with boots she'd gotten on sale 3 years ago. The car arrived at 7 exactly, not the Mercedes. Something smaller, less conspicuous. The driver nodded politely and said nothing during the ride to Chelsea. The gallery occupied a converted warehouse, all white walls and track lighting and art that probably cost more than Zoe would earn in a lifetime. People clustered in expensive groups, holding wine glasses and having conversations about negative space and postmodern something. Seojun stood near a massive abstract painting, black suit perfectly tailored, talking to a woman who looked like she'd walked out of a fashion magazine. Zoe's stomach dropped. The woman was beautiful in that effortless way Zoe had never managed. Tall, elegant, wearing a dress that probably required a team of stylists. She laughed at something Seojun said, touching his arm with casual familiarity. He hadn't seen Zoe yet. She could leave. Could text him an excuse and disappear back into her invisible life before this got worse. Then Seo Jun's eyes found her across the gallery. Everything else disappeared. The woman, the art, the wealthy crowd, all of it faded into background noise while his attention locked onto Zoe with that same unsettling precision from the subway weeks ago. He said something to the woman and crossed the gallery floor toward Zoe without looking back. "You came," he said when he reached her. "You invited me." "I did, but I wasn't sure." He stopped, seeming to register her expression. "What's wrong?" "Who's that?" Zoe nodded toward the elegant woman, who was now watching them with undisguised interest. "Yuna Park. Her father runs a syndicate that borders mine." Seo Jun's voice stayed neutral, but tension leaked into his shoulders. "We've known each other since we were kids." "She's beautiful." "Yes." The honest answer landed like a slap. Zoe turned to leave, but Seo Jun caught her wrist gently. "She's also the woman everyone expected me to marry," he said quietly. "Political alliance, strategic merger, all the logical reasons that have nothing to do with what I actually want." "What do you want?" "To show you this painting." He gestured toward the massive abstract canvas behind him, violent splashes of crimson and black, chaos rendered in oil. "It's called Before the Storm." Zoe let him guide her closer to the painting, hyper-aware of his hand still circling her wrist. "I hate it," she said. "So do I. But Yuna's family commissioned the artist, so I have to pretend I find it meaningful." He released her wrist, stepping beside her to study the canvas. "That's what my life has been. Pretending to appreciate things I hate, making alliances that benefit the empire, keeping everyone happy except myself." "That's a lot of self-pity for a man who runs half the city." His mouth curved, genuine smile this time. "Fair point." Yuna approached, heels clicking on polished concrete. Up close she was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, perfect skin. Eyes that assessed Zoe in under 3 seconds and found her lacking. "So this is her," Yuna said in English touched with the same accent Seo Jun carried. "The waitress." "Zoe Mercer," Seo Jun said, voice cooling. "This is Yuna Park." "Charmed." Yuna's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Seo Jun's been unusually distracted lately. Now I understand why." "Yuna," Seo Jun said, warning in his tone. "What?" "I'm being friendly." She turned to Zoe, tilting her head. "How does it feel? Knowing you're the reason he ended negotiations with my family? Knowing your little subway encounter derailed an alliance 2 years in the making?" Zoe's blood went cold. "What? You didn't tell her." Yuna looked at Seo Jun, laughing without humor. "Oh, this is rich. She doesn't even know what she destroyed." "That's enough," Seo Jun said. But Yuna had momentum now, cruelty sharpening her elegant features. "The marriage was all but finalized. Our families, working together, would have controlled everything from here to Los Angeles. Unstoppable." She gestured at Zoe with her wine glass. "Then you showed up, and suddenly he's calling off meetings, refusing terms, destabilizing years of careful planning, all because you let him nap on your shoulder." "I said enough." Seo Jun's voice dropped to something dangerous. Yuna raised her hands in mock surrender. "Fine. I'll let you explain to your new pet what happens when personal feelings interfere with empire politics." She drained her wine and walked away, heels sharp as gunshots against concrete. Zoe turned to Seo Jun. "Is that true? You ended an engagement because of me?" "Not an engagement. Negotiations." His jaw worked. "And yes. When were you going to tell me?" "When it was relevant." "It's relevant now, Seo Jun. You just..." She stopped, aware of people starting to watch. Lowered her voice. "You destabilized your entire organization because of 4 subway stops?" "No. I destabilized it because I was tired of making decisions based on what the empire needed instead of what I needed." He moved closer, forcing her to meet his eyes. "The marriage would have been smart politics and a personal nightmare. I chose differently." "That's not fair. You can't put that on me." "I'm not. This is my choice, my consequences. But you asked me to be more than what everyone sees." His hand lifted, hovering near her face without touching. "This is what that looks like. Messy and complicated and possibly a massive mistake." Around them, the gallery had gone quiet. People pretended not to watch while absolutely watching. Yuna stood near the back, expression unreadable. Zoe felt the weight of every eye in the room. felt the space where she stood suddenly charged with significance she'd never asked for. "I need air," she said. She walked toward the exit, not caring if Seo-jun followed. Outside, rain had started again, cold and sharp, turning the street into a river of reflected neon. Zoe stood under the gallery's small awning, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. Seo-jun emerged a minute later, jacket already soaked. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what? Being honest? Making choices about your own life?" Zoe laughed bitterly. "I'm not even sure why I'm angry. Because you didn't ask for any of this. You just wanted to get home on a Tuesday night, and I turned that into leverage for dismantling political alliances." He leaned against the wall, rain dripping from his hair. "Yuna's right. This is selfish, dangerous, probably going to blow up in both our faces. Then why do it?" "Because I'm tired of being lonely in rooms full of people. Because you're the first person in 4 years who treated me like a human instead of a resource. Because—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "Because what?" "Because I think I'm falling for you, and that terrifies me more than anything I've faced in this business." The confession hung in the rain-soaked air between them, raw and unguarded. Zoe stared at him, this dangerous man in his expensive suit, soaked and honest, and looking at her like she was the most unpredictable thing in his world. "You barely know me," she said. "I know you work 3 jobs and refuse help out of pride. I know you eat discount fruit and pay rent late, but still give money to subway performers. I know you see invisible people because you've been invisible yourself." His voice softened. "I know you asked me to spare enemies because you believe in second chances, and I haven't believed in anything except survival in years. That's not love. That's infatuation, obsession." He pushed off the wall. "Maybe, but I want to find out. And I think you do too, or you wouldn't be standing in the rain arguing instead of taking the subway home." He was right. She could leave, could walk 3 blocks to the station, ride the train back to Queens, lock her door, and never answer his calls again, but she'd stopped wanting to disappear. "This is going to be complicated," Zoe said. "It already is. People are going to get hurt." "Probably. I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I." He stepped closer, rain streaming between them. "But I'd rather figure it out with you than stay safe alone." Zoe looked at him, really looked, seeing past the tattoos and expensive clothes and controlled violence to something more fragile underneath. He was just as scared as she was, just as uncertain, just as tired of surviving instead of living. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay, let's be terrified together. Let's make mistakes and figure it out and probably destroy several things in the process." She closed the distance between them, rain soaking through her dress. "But you have to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets. No more protecting me from information because you think I can't handle it. We're equals in this, or we're nothing. Deal." His hand came up, finally touching her face, palm warm against her cold cheek. "And you have to promise me something." "What?" "Tell me when you're scared, when it's too much, when you need to walk away." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I've lost people before because I didn't notice they were breaking. I don't want to lose you that way." Zoe leaned into his touch, feeling something crack open in her chest, fear and hope, and the reckless certainty that she'd just stepped off a cliff with no idea where she'd land. "I'm terrified right now," she admitted. "Good," Sejun said. "So am I." Then he kissed her. Not gentle, not the kind of first kiss that asked permission or tested boundaries. This was desperate and honest and tasted like rain and wine and the specific fear of people who'd decided to stop running from what scared them most. When they broke apart, Zoe's heart hammered against her ribs hard enough to hurt. "We should get out of the rain," Seo-jun said against her mouth. "Probably." Neither of them moved. Inside the gallery, through the rain-streaked windows, Zoe could see Yuna watching them. Her expression was unreadable, but her hand gripped her wine glass hard enough that Zoe wondered if it might shatter. "She's going to make this harder," Zoe said. "Let her try." Seo-jun followed her gaze, then looked back at Zoe with something fierce in his eyes. "I spent years making choices that kept everyone else happy. I'm done." They went back inside eventually, soaked in probably scandal for tomorrow's gossip. Seo-jun kept his hand on Zoe's lower back as they moved through the gallery, Not possessive, just present, claiming nothing except the right to stand beside her. Yuna had disappeared. The art crowd pretended normalcy had returned, but Zoe felt the shift in attention. She was no longer invisible, no longer just another waitress in a city full of them. She'd become the woman who'd changed Seojun Han's trajectory, and she had no idea if she'd survived the fall. They left before the gallery closed, stepping into a city that felt different now, charged with possibility and threat in equal measure. The car waited at the curb. Seojun opened the door for her, old-fashioned despite everything else. "Where to?" the driver asked. Seojun looked at Zoe. "Your choice. She should go home. Should create space to process everything that had just shifted." Instead, she heard herself say, "Somewhere we can talk. Somewhere quiet." He gave the driver an address in Korean. They drove through rain-slick streets while Zoe's mind raced through implications she was only beginning to understand. The car stopped outside a building in the West Village, old brownstone, expensive but understated. Seojun led her up 3 flights to an apartment that looked nothing like what she'd expected. No black leather, no obvious displays of wealth, just a clean space with comfortable furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street, and books everywhere, stacked on tables, shelved along walls, piled beside a worn armchair. "You read," Zoe said stupidly. "Surprised?" "A little." She moved toward the nearest stack, philosophy, history, a thriller with a cracked spine from multiple readings. "I thought mafia bosses spent their time counting money and intimidating people." "I do that too, but late at night, when the empire's quiet, I read." He shrugged out of his wet jacket, hanging it over a chair. "Want coffee? Tea? Something stronger?" "Coffee. Always coffee." He disappeared into the kitchen. Zoe stood in the center of his living room, dripping on expensive hardwood, trying to reconcile this space with the man who had tattoos documenting violence across his entire torso. "How long have you lived here?" she called. 4 years since I took over." His voice carried from the kitchen over the sound of grinding beans. "It's quiet. Nobody knows about it except my core team. You brought me to your secret apartment." "I brought you somewhere we could talk without audience." He emerged with 2 mugs, handing her one. "I meant what I said about no more secrets." They sat on opposite ends of his couch, maintaining careful distance while rain drummed against the windows. Zoe wrapped her hands around the mug's warmth and tried to figure out where to start. "Tell me about the alliance," she finally said. "The real story." Sojun stared into his coffee for a long moment. Then, "Yuna's father controls the West Coast networks. Narcotics mostly, some gun running, protection rackets in San Francisco and Seattle. My organization handles the East Coast. Similar portfolio, different territories. A marriage between us would have unified both operations, created a monopoly on the entire Pacific trafficking pipeline." "But you said no." "I said no." He set down his mug. "My father arranged it before he died. Yuna and I were supposed to announce the engagement last month. Instead, I called her father and ended negotiations. Because of me. Because of a lot of things. You were just the catalyst." He leaned back, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "I've been running this empire since I was 22. 4 years of violence and strategy and sleeping 3 hours a night because rest means vulnerability. I was good at it, ruthless and efficient, and exactly what the organization needed. What changed? You let a stranger sleep on your shoulder." His eyes found hers. "And I realized I'd forgotten what it felt like to trust another human being, to not calculate threat in every interaction, to just exist without armor." Zoe's chest tightened. "That's a lot of weight to put on 4 subway stops." "I know, but I can't unfeel it." He reached across the couch, hand extended. "So I ended the marriage negotiations, accepted that it would cause problems, and decided to find out if that moment on the train was real or just exhaustion." She took his hand, their fingers laced together, warm and real and terrifying. "What if it was just exhaustion?" Zoe asked. "Then I made a terrible business decision for personal reasons, and I'll deal with the consequences." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But I don't think it was." They sat like that for a while, holding hands on his couch while the city moved outside his windows. Eventually, Zoe's eyes started getting heavy, the long day and emotional whiplash catching up. "I should go home," she said without moving. "Stay." Seojun squeezed her hand. Guest room. No expectations. Just stay. She should refuse. Should maintain boundaries that were already crumbling. But his apartment was warm, and her place was cold, and she was so tired of going home alone. Okay, Zoe said. He showed her to a bedroom that was clearly unused. Blank walls, generic furniture, the impersonal quality of hotel rooms. But the bed had clean sheets, and the door had a lock, and when Seo-jun said goodnight, he didn't try to kiss her again. Zoe lay in the dark, listening to him move around the apartment, water running, dishes being washed, the low murmur of a phone conversation in Korean. Eventually, silence settled. She didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what the fuck she'd just committed to. Morning came too early. Zoe woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee, disoriented until memory assembled itself. Seo-jun's apartment, the gallery, Yuna's cruel precision, the kiss in the rain. She found clothes folded outside her door, joggers and a sweater, several sizes too big but clean and soft. No note, just an offering. In the kitchen, Seo-jun stood at the counter, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that made him look younger, almost normal. He was reading something on his phone, expression dark. What's wrong? Zoe asked. He looked up. Yuna's father called. He wants a meeting. About the alliance? About you. Seo-jun set down his phone. Specifically, about how to handle the fact that I chose a civilian over his daughter. Zoe's stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means we have a problem. He poured her coffee, movements automatic. Yuna's family doesn't take rejection well. They're going to push back, test boundaries, make sure I understand the cost of my decision. Will they hurt you? Me? No. I'm too valuable, too dangerous. His eyes met hers. But people close to me are easier targets. The implications settled like ice water. You're saying I'm in danger. I'm saying you're visible now, and visibility in my world means vulnerability. He crossed to where she stood, taking her hands. I can protect you. We'll protect you. But it's going to be invasive. Security, surveillance, restrictions on where you go and who you see. Like a cage. Like safety. There's a difference. Is there? Zoe pulled her hands back. Because it sounds like I just traded invisibility for a different kind of prison. Then leave, Seo-jun said quietly. Walk out right now. I'll make sure Yuna's family understands you're not relevant, not worth their attention. You go back to your life, and this becomes an interesting story you tell someday. And you? I handle the political fallout alone. His voice stayed level, but something cracked underneath. Like I always have. Zoe stared at him, this man who'd dismantled years of planning because she'd offered him 4 stops of human connection. Who'd shown her his scars and admitted fear and kissed her in the rain like drowning. She should leave. Should choose survival over whatever this dangerous, complicated thing was becoming. Instead, she stepped forward and kissed him. Not desperate this time. Just certain. Choosing him despite everything rational screaming otherwise. When she pulled back, Seo-jun's hands were shaking where they gripped her waist. Okay, Zoe said. Tell me what happens next. Next? His forehead rested against hers. Next, we prepare for consequences. Next, I make it very clear to everyone in this business that you're off limits. Next, we figure out how to build something normal inside a world that has no idea what normal means. Sounds impossible. Probably is. He kissed her once more, soft and careful. But I'm willing to try if you are. I'm terrified. Good. Me too. Outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Inside, 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way possible stood in a kitchen holding on to something fragile and dangerous and possibly doomed. But for the first time in years, neither of them felt invisible. And that was worth whatever came next. The meeting with Yuna's father happened 3 days later in a restaurant Seo-jun owned but never visited. Neutral ground that wasn't neutral at all. Zoe wasn't invited, but she felt the weight of it in the way Seo-jun moved through his apartment that morning. Every gesture controlled to the point of rigidity. Stay here, he said, buttoning his shirt with mechanical precision. Don't answer the door. Don't leave for any reason. You think they'd come here? I think desperation makes people stupid, and Yuna's family is getting desperate. He checked his watch, the expensive one, not the casual piece he wore at home. I'll have 2 men outside the building. You won't see them, but they're there. Zoe sat on the edge of his bed wearing his sweater because her clothes still smelled like rain and gallery wine. What are you going to tell them? That the alliance is dead, that you're not negotiable, that if they want war, I'll give them one they can't win. His reflection in the mirror looked like the man from the subway, cold, controlled, dangerous. The usual empire politics. Seo-jun, don't. He turned, crossing to where she sat. His hands cupped her face with surprising gentleness. Don't ask me to reconsider. Don't ask me to choose differently. I've already chosen. I was going to say be careful. Something in his expression softened. I'm always careful. No, you're always controlled. There's a difference. He kissed her forehead, then her mouth, then pulled back before it could deepen into something that would make leaving harder. I'll be back by dinner. We'll order from that Thai place you like. The one that's too expensive? Nothing's too expensive anymore. He grabbed his jacket from the chair. Young, get used to it. Then he was gone, and Zoe was alone in his apartment with nothing but books and expensive silence. She tried reading, tried watching television on the massive screen that probably cost more than her yearly rent, tried not checking her phone every 3 minutes for updates that wouldn't come because Seo-jun didn't text during business. By noon, restlessness had her pacing. By 2, she'd given up on staying still and started exploring his apartment properly. The books were eclectic, philosophy next to crime novels, poetry beside economics textbooks. His bedroom was sparse, bed made with military precision, closet full of identical black suits. The only personal item was a photograph on his nightstand, edges worn from handling. Zoe picked it up. A younger Seo-jun, maybe 16, hair longer, no visible tattoos yet, standing beside an older man who had the same sharp features and cold eyes. His father, probably. Both of them looked uncomfortable with physical proximity, standing just far enough apart that connection seemed impossible. She set the photo down and immediately felt guilty for snooping. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Having fun playing house? Zoe's blood went cold. She didn't respond. Another message. Seo-jun's in a meeting. Probably told you to stay put like a good pet. Does he know how boring you must be getting? This time a photo came through. Zoe's apartment building, taken from street level. Recent, based on the car parked outside that she recognized from this morning. We know where you really live, where you work. Every place you disappear to when you're pretending to be normal. Zoe's hands shook. She should call Seo-jun, should alert his security, should do anything except stare at her phone while someone documented her entire life in photo form. The next message made her stomach drop. Your friend Claudia says hello. Pretty girl. Be a shame if her mistake caught up with her. Now Zoe called. Seo-jun answered on the first ring, voice low. I'm in the middle. Someone's texting me, threatening Claudia. They have photos of my building. Silence. Then, show me. She forwarded the messages, heard him exhale slowly on the other end. Stay on the line, he said. Background noise suggested movement, a door closing, voices being cut off. Are you still at my apartment? Yes. Good. I'm sending 2 more men to the building. They'll be inside within 5 minutes. Do not open the door for anyone except them. They'll identify themselves with the code word Orchid. Seo-jun, what's happening? Yuna's family is trying to rattle you, make you scared, make you leave. His voice stayed level, but fury leaked through the edges. It's a tactic, crude but effective if you don't know it's coming. They have photos of Claudia. They have photos. That doesn't mean access. A pause. I'll handle this. But Zoe, I need you to understand something. This is what I meant about visibility. This is the cost. I know. Do you? Because it gets worse before it gets better. The doorbell rang. Zoe jumped, phone still pressed to her ear. Don't answer it, Seo-jun said immediately. You said 5 minutes? My men would call first. Don't answer the door. The bell rang again, persistent, demanding. Zoe moved toward the door on instinct, then stopped. Through the peephole, she saw an older woman in a delivery uniform holding a package. It's just a courier, Zoe said. No, it's not. Step away from the door. Seo-jun, you're being paranoid. The woman's face lifted toward the peephole, and Zoe's words died. Even through the distorted glass, she could see the calculation in those eyes. The flat assessment of a professional, not a courier, running late. I see her, Zoe whispered. Good. Back away slowly. Go to my bedroom, lock the door, and wait. His voice had gone cold, controlled. I'm leaving now, 10 minutes. The doorbell stopped ringing. Footsteps retreated down the hallway. Zoe stood frozen, heart hammering so hard she felt it in her throat. Her phone buzzed again. Same unknown number, smart girl. But you can't hide in his apartment forever. Zoe made it to the bedroom before her legs gave out. She sat on the floor with her back against the locked door, phone clutched in shaking hands, while reality crashed down around her. This was real. The danger, the threats, the carefully constructed violence that Seo-jun navigated daily, it was all real, and she'd stepped into it with open eyes, but no real understanding of what that meant. Footsteps in the hallway. Multiple sets, moving fast. Zoe, Seo-jun's voice through the door, rough with barely controlled panic. It's me. Open up. She unlocked the door. He was inside immediately, hands on her face, checking for damage she didn't have. I'm fine, Zoe said. You're not. You're shaking. He pulled her against his chest, one hand in her hair, the other pressed flat against her spine. I'm sorry. I thought we had more time before they escalated. What did they want? To scare you, to prove they can reach you whenever they want. His voice vibrated against her ear. The meeting was a setup. Keep me occupied while they made their point. Did it work? Seo-jun pulled back, studying her face. Are you scared? Terrified. Then yes, it worked. He stood, helping her up. Pack what you need. We're leaving. To where? Somewhere they don't know about. Somewhere I can control the access points. He was already moving, grabbing his own bag from the closet with practiced efficiency. I have a place upstate. Isolated, secure. We'll go there until this settles. I have work. You have a target on your back. He stopped, meeting her eyes. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know it's too much too fast. But right now, your options are run or trust me to keep you safe. Choose. Zoe looked around his bedroom. The spare furniture, the single photograph, the life of someone who'd learned comfort was a liability. Then she looked at Seo-jun, disheveled and furious and radiating the kind of protective intensity that should have scared her more than it did. How long? She asked. A week, maybe 2. Long enough for me to make it very clear what happens when people threaten what's mine. And Claudia? Already protected. I had security on her before I left the meeting. He crossed back to Zoe, taking her hands. I don't leave loose ends, especially not ones that matter to you. She packed. Not much. Some clothes borrowed from him, her phone, the copy of the book she'd been pretending to read. Everything else felt suddenly unimportant compared to the immediacy of breath and pulse, and the way Seo-jun kept checking the windows like threats might materialize from thin air. They left through the building's service exit, flanked by 4 men Zoe had never seen before. The car waiting wasn't the Mercedes or the smaller sedan. This was an SUV with tinted windows and reinforced panels that probably stopped bullets. Zoe climbed in and tried not to think about why that was necessary. The drive took 90 minutes, heading north until the city dissolved into suburbs and then into actual trees. Seo-jun spent the entire trip on his phone, speaking in rapid Korean that Zoe couldn't follow but understood from tone alone. Orders being given, consequences being threatened, an empire being mobilized to protect one exhausted waitress. The house appeared suddenly, set back from the road behind gates that required 3 separate access codes. It was smaller than Zoe expected. 2 stories, modern design, surrounded by woods that looked peaceful and isolating in equal measure. No neighbors for 3 miles, Seo-jun said, helping her out of the car. Security monitors every approach. You're safe here. Inside, the house had the same spare quality as his apartment. Expensive but impersonal, more bunker than home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the forest. The kitchen looked like it had never been used. Everything felt temporary. How often do you come here? Zoe asked. Not often enough. He set their bags down, already moving through the space with military efficiency, checking locks, testing the security system, ensuring the invisible barriers between them and the world actually held. My father built it as a fallback position, somewhere to retreat if Manhattan got too hot. Did he use it? Once. Right before he died. Seo-jun's voice went flat. Someone tried to kill him at a restaurant. He came here, planned his response, then went back and eliminated everyone involved. Jesus. No, just violence. He turned, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. You should rest. It's been a long day. It's barely 4 p.m., and you've been threatened, relocated, and dragged into the middle of a gang war. He gestured toward the stairs. Pick any bedroom. They're all the same. Zoe didn't move. Are you okay? The question seemed to surprise him. Why wouldn't I be? Because you just walked out of a meeting to rush across the city because I was scared. Because you're running damage control on multiple fronts. Because you look like you haven't slept in 3 days. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. His mouth almost smiled. So are you. They stood in the empty living room surrounded by expensive furniture nobody used, and Zoe realized they'd crossed some invisible threshold. This wasn't a game anymore. Wasn't curiosity or infatuation or the reckless certainty that had felt like freedom 3 days ago. This was survival. Messy and complicated and possibly fatal if either of them made the wrong choice. I'm going to make coffee, Sejun said finally. Then I need to make about 15 calls that are going to be very loud and very angry. You don't need to hear them. What are you going to do? What I should have done the first time. His expression went cold, controlled. Make it very clear what happens when people threaten you. He disappeared into the kitchen. Zoe climbed the stairs, found a bedroom that looked exactly like all the others, and lay down on a bed that smelled like nothing. No history, no life, just expensive sheets in an expensive cage. She must have slept, because when she woke, the light had changed and voices carried from downstairs. Seojun's, angry and sharp. Someone else responding in Korean, defensive and rapid. Zoe crept to the landing. Through the railing, she could see Seojun pacing the living room, phone pressed to his ear, free hand gesturing with barely contained fury. I don't care what your father wants, he said in English, switching languages mid-sentence. You sent people to my building. You threatened a civilian. Those were choices, Yuna. Now deal with the consequences. Silence while Yuna responded. Zoe watched Seojun's jaw clench. No, he said flatly. We're past negotiation. You want to know what it costs to come at me through someone I care about? You're about to find out. He hung up, threw his phone onto the couch, stood there breathing hard, hands curled into fists. How much did you hear? He asked, without turning around. Enough. Zoe descended the stairs slowly. What are you going to do? Cut off 3 of their supply routes, freeze 2 of their offshore accounts, and make it known that anyone doing business with the Park family will lose access to my distribution networks. His voice stayed level despite the violence in the words. Standard escalation. That's going to start a war. No, that's going to end one before it gets worse. He finally looked at her. They thought I was bluffing about you being off limits. I'm clarifying. By destroying their business. By making the cost of touching you higher than they're willing to pay. He crossed to where she stood, taking her hands. His were still shaking slightly. I know this is ugly. I know it's not what you wanted when you let me sleep on your shoulder, but I don't know how else to keep you safe. Maybe I don't want to be kept safe. The words came out sharper than intended. Maybe I want to be consulted before you start economic warfare on my behalf. His grip tightened. You think I should let them scare you? Let them prove they can reach you whenever they want? Let them turn you into leverage against me? I think you should remember I'm a person, not a chess piece. You're the most important person in my life right now. His voice cracked slightly. That's the problem. That's why they're coming at you, because I can't hide that you matter. The confession hung between them, raw and desperate. Zoe pulled her hands free. I need air. You can't go outside. Watch me. She walked toward the back door. Sojun moved to intercept, then stopped himself. Fists clenched at his sides while she stepped onto the deck overlooking dark woods. The air was colder here than in the city, sharp enough to burn her lungs. Zoe gripped the railing and tried to breathe through the panic, clawing up her throat. Behind her, the door opened, closed. Seojun's presence settled beside her without touching. My father used to bring me here, he said quietly. After particularly bad nights, times when the violence got too close, when I saw things kids shouldn't see. He'd pour whiskey and tell me the same thing every time. The Empire requires sacrifice. Yours, mine, everyone's. Get used to it. Zoe looked at him. His profile was hard in the dim light, jaw set. I hated him for that, Seo-jun continued, for reducing everything to cost-benefit analysis, for teaching me that caring about people was weakness. He turned, meeting her eyes. Then I met you, and I understood what he meant, because the more I care, the more vulnerable I become. The more people can hurt me by hurting you. So what? You stop caring? No. I figure out how to care and survive simultaneously. His hand found hers on the railing, even if that means doing ugly things to protect what matters. I didn't ask for this. I know, but you got it anyway. He squeezed her hand. And I'm selfish enough to not let go. They stood like that while darkness settled around the house, and the woods filled with sounds that might have been wind or wildlife or threats Zoe couldn't see. Eventually cold drove them inside, where Seo-jun made dinner from ingredients someone had stocked the kitchen with, probably the same security team that monitored every approach. They ate in silence, cleaned up in silence, moved around each other with the careful choreography of people trying not to acknowledge the impossibility of their situation. Zoe went to bed early, exhaustion winning over anxiety. She heard Seo-jun moving through the house for hours, footsteps, phone calls, the specific sounds of someone running an empire from a bunker. Morning brought weak sunlight and the smell of coffee. Zoe found Seo-jun in the kitchen, already dressed, staring at his laptop with an expression that made her stomach drop. What happened? She asked. He didn't look up. The Parks made a move overnight, hit one of my warehouses, took out 3 of my men. Are they, One's dead. 2 in the hospital. His voice stayed flat, empty. Retaliation for the supply route disruption. Zoe felt sick. This is because of me. This is because they're testing boundaries. He finally met her eyes. And because I wasn't ruthless enough the first time. What does that mean? It means I'm done playing defense. He closed the laptop. I have to go back to the city. Handle this directly. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You don't get to lock me away while you start a war, Seo-jun. I'm not starting anything. I'm finishing it. He stood, already pulling away. You stay here. Security stays with you. I'll be back in 48 hours. And if you're not? The question stopped him. For one moment, his control cracked enough to show the fear underneath. Not of violence or death, but of leaving her alone in a world that had proven itself hostile. If I'm not back in 48 hours, my second-in-command will come get you. His name is Min. He'll make sure you're safe, give you money, help you disappear if that's what you want. Seo-jun's hands clenched at his sides. But I will be back. He left an hour later, flanked by men in dark suits who looked like they were going to war. Maybe they were. Zoe watched from the window until the SUV disappeared down the driveway, then stood in the empty house trying to figure out how her life had become this. The first day passed slowly. Security checked in every few hours, polite, professional, offering nothing except assurance that the perimeter was secure. Zoe read, paced, tried not to check her phone every 5 minutes for updates that didn't come. Night brought silence so complete it felt hostile. Zoe lay in bed staring at the ceiling, acutely aware that Seo-jun was somewhere in Manhattan doing violent things to protect her, and she couldn't do anything except wait. Her phone buzzed at 2 a.m. Text from Seo-jun. Still alive. Handling things. Sleep. She tried. Failed. Got up and made coffee she didn't want, standing in the dark kitchen while her mind raced through scenarios she couldn't control. Day 2 started with rain, cold and relentless, turning the woods gray. The security team changed shifts. New faces, same professional distance. Zoe felt like a prisoner being guarded by people paid to care whether she lived or died. By afternoon, restlessness had turned to genuine anxiety. No updates from Seo-jun. No calls. Just silence that felt more ominous with every passing hour. She was staring at her phone, debating whether to text him when it rang. Unknown number. Zoe almost didn't answer. Then some instinct made her pick up. Hello? Is this Zoe Mercer? A woman's voice, professional, clipped. Who's asking? My name is Detective Sarah Chen with the NYPD. I'm calling about Seo-jun Han. Zoe's blood went cold. What about him? He's been arrested. I need you to come to the precinct to answer some questions. The world tilted. Arrested for what? I can't discuss that over the phone, but I need you to come in voluntarily, or I'll have to send officers to bring you in. Your choice. I'm not in the city. Zoe stopped, some survival instinct kicking in. I need to talk to a lawyer. You're not under arrest, Miss Mercer. We just have questions. A pause. But if you refuse to cooperate, that changes things. The call ended. Zoe stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear. Seo-jun arrested, police wanting to question her, everything falling apart exactly like he'd warned it would. She called the number he'd given her for emergencies. A man answered immediately, voice sharp. Who is this? Zoe Mercer. I need to talk to Min. This is Min. What happened? The police called. They said Seo-jun's been arrested. They want me to come in for questioning. Silence. Then, don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'm sending people to get you now. What's happening? Is he really? I don't know yet, but until I do, you stay exactly where you are. His voice softened slightly. I'll figure this out. But Zoe, if the police show up before my team gets there, you say nothing. Understand? Not a word without a lawyer. Okay. I'm serious. Nothing. Not your name. Not how you know Seo-jun. Nothing. The call ended. Zoe sank onto the couch, mind racing. Arrested. That meant evidence. That meant someone had built a case strong enough to hold him. That meant her phone rang again. Different unknown number. She shouldn't answer. Knew she shouldn't. But her hand moved on autopilot. Zoe, Claudia's voice, shaking badly. Oh, fuck, Zoe. I'm so sorry. Claudia, what? They came to me. The police. They knew about the dinner, about me selling information. They said they'd charge me as an accessory unless I cooperated. Claudia was crying now, words tumbling out between sobs. I told them about you, about how you know Seo-jun, about the gallery and his apartment and everything. I'm so sorry. I didn't. They said I'd go to prison if I didn't help them. Zoe couldn't breathe. What did you tell them? Everything. Every detail you ever mentioned. How you met, where he took you, the fact that you were seeing each other. Claudia's voice broke. They said you were in danger, that Seo-jun was dangerous, that I was helping you by cooperating. Jesus Christ, Claudia. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Zoe hung up, stood there shaking while reality reconstructed itself into something unrecognizable. Seo-jun arrested, Claudia cooperating with police, herself about to be dragged into an investigation that would expose every detail of the last month. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Your friend talks a lot when scared. Did you really think you could hide in his world without consequences? Then a photo. Seo-jun in handcuffs, being led into a police station, his face carefully blank. Another text. He'll be out in 72 hours. But by then, everyone will know what he is, what you helped him do. Was 4 subway stops worth destroying your life? Zoe's vision blurred. She sat down hard on the couch, phone falling from numb fingers. Outside, car engines approached. Multiple vehicles moving fast. Security's radios crackled to life with urgent Korean. Then the front door crashed open. Men flooded in. Not Seo-jun's security, not police. Something else. They moved with military precision, weapons drawn, faces covered. Zoe tried to run, made it 3 steps before hands grabbed her, spinning her around. A man in tactical gear, eyes cold above a black mask. Don't scream, he said in accented English. Don't fight. You're coming with us. Zoe screamed anyway. Screamed. Someone hit her, not hard enough to knock her out, just enough to stun. Her knees buckled. Hands caught her, lifted her, carried her toward the door while gunfire erupted somewhere in the house. The security team, fighting back, losing. Zoe's last clear thought before darkness took her was that Seo-jun had been right about everything. And she'd just learned exactly what visibility cost. But she woke to cold concrete and complete darkness. Not the comfortable dark of a room at night. This was absolute. No light bleeding under doors, no ambient city glow, no stars through windows, just black so complete it felt solid. Zoe sat up slowly, head pounding. Her hands found rough walls, a corner, floor that smelled like mildew and old fear. She was in a basement or bunker, somewhere underground. Hello? Her voice came out hoarse, shaking. No answer. She felt along the walls, finding smooth concrete on 3 sides, and what felt like a steel door on the 4th. no handle on the inside. No hinges she could reach. No weakness she could exploit. Time passed. She had no way to measure it. Could have been an hour, could have been 6. Thirst started burning her throat. Panic clawed at her chest in waves she forced back down through sheer stubbornness. Finally, footsteps. A lock clicking. The door opened, flooding the space with painful fluorescent light. Una stood in the doorway, immaculate in white pants and a silk blouse, looking at Zoe like she was something unpleasant on the bottom of her shoe. "So this is what he chose over an empire," Una said. Zoe's eyes adjusted slowly. Behind Una, 2 men stood guard, professionals like the ones who'd taken her. This wasn't improvisation. This was planned. "Where am I?" Zoe asked. "Somewhere nobody will find you. Somewhere Seo-jun can't protect you." Una stepped inside, the door closing behind her. "Somewhere you'll stay until he understands the cost of his choices. He'll come for me. He's in a police cell answering questions about his organization. By the time he's out, you'll be leverage." Una crouched, meeting Zoe's eyes. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to convince Seo-jun to honor the original alliance, the marriage, the merger, everything he walked away from. Or you're going to disappear so completely that not even your bones turn up. He won't do it. He will, because for all his ruthlessness, he's developed a very exploitable weakness." Una's smile was sharp. "You." She stood, moving toward the door. "Wait," Zoe said. "How did you get to Claudia? How did you know about the police?" Una paused. "You think we didn't have someone inside the investigation? Someone feeding us information about Seo-jun's movements, his associates, his new pet project?" She laughed without humor. "We've been planning this for weeks, Zoe. Every move Seo-jun made, we were 3 steps ahead. That's impossible. He's too careful." "He was too careful. Then he met you and started making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones." Una's expression turned cold. "That's what love does. Makes smart men stupid, makes kings into fools." The door opened. Una stepped through. "Someone will bring you food and water. Don't waste energy screaming. We're 15 feet underground, and the nearest building is half a mile away." She paused. "Oh, and Seo-jun's second in command? Min? He's the one who told us where you were staying. Seo-jun's organization isn't as loyal as he thinks." The door closed. The lock clicked. Darkness returned. Zoe sat in the black silence and felt her world collapse completely. Seo-jun arrested. Claudia a police informant. Min a traitor. Herself kidnapped and alone. Every person she'd counted on, compromised. Every choice she'd made, weaponized against her. She thought about the subway, that first night, the bruised apple, the unexpected moment of human connection. How simple it had seemed, how impossible to predict it would lead here, to a concrete cell with no way out. Zoe leaned her head back against the wall and tried to figure out how to survive what came next. Because one thing had become very clear. If she was getting out of this, she'd have to do it herself. Nobody was coming to save her. And the man she'd chosen over invisibility was trapped behind bars, fighting battles she couldn't see while she rotted in darkness. She closed her eyes and started counting her breaths, the way she'd learned to do during the worst shifts, the longest nights, the times when giving up seemed easier than surviving. In through the nose, out through the mouth, one breath at a time, until she figured out how to become something more dangerous than the people who'd taken her. The darkness lasted 3 days. Or what felt like 3 days. Time dissolved into nothing when fluorescent light appeared only twice, accompanied by bottled water and packaged food shoved through a slot in the door. Zoe ate mechanically, drank sparingly, and spent the hours between counting her heartbeats and planning. She had no weapons, no phone, no way to communicate with anyone outside this concrete box. But she had something Una hadn't accounted for. 26 years of surviving in a city that specialized in making people disappear. Invisibility was her oldest skill. Maybe it was time to weaponize it. The 4th time the door opened, Zoe was ready. She'd positioned herself in the far corner, body language collapsed and defeated, breathing deliberately shallow. When the guard entered with food, she didn't move, just stayed slumped against the wall like something broken. He set the tray down, checking her with professional disinterest. Young, maybe 25, with the kind of hardness that came from doing bad things for money. He turned to leave. Zoe lunged, not at him. At the door propped open behind him. She was small, fast, powered by 3 days of rage compressed into explosive movement. The guard grabbed for her but caught only air as she slipped past, hitting the hallway at full sprint. Behind her, shouting erupted. Footsteps pounded concrete. She ran blind through a basement corridor lit by emergency lights. No idea where she was going, just moving because stopping meant capture. A stairwell appeared. She took the steps 3 at a time, lungs screaming, legs shaking from disuse. Another hallway. An exit sign glowing red in the distance. She almost made it. A hand caught her hair, yanking her backward so hard her vision whited out. Zoe hit the floor, tasting copper, ears ringing. The guard hauled her up by her arm, fingers digging bruises into her bicep. "Stupid," he said in accented English, dragging her back toward the basement. Zoe went limp, forcing him to carry her full weight. He swore, adjusting his grip. She waited until his balance shifted, then drove her elbow into his ribs with everything she had left. He grunted, grip loosening. Zoe twisted free, but her exhausted legs betrayed her. She stumbled, fell, scrambled toward the stairs on hands and knees. This time, 2 guards converged. One caught her ankle, dragging her backward across the concrete floor. Her palms scraped raw. She kicked back blindly, connected with something soft. A satisfying grunt of pain. Then hands everywhere, pinning her arms, forcing her face against cold floor, zip ties biting into her wrists. "Enough," someone said. Yuna's voice, sharp with irritation. They hauled Zoe upright. Blood dripped from her nose, her palms burned, her wrists already aching from the plastic restraints. But she'd seen the layout. Knew the exit was 15 feet up those stairs, through a door that led to what looked like a warehouse. Information was a weapon, too. Yuna stood at the top of the basement stairs, immaculate as ever, studying Zoe like a disappointing science experiment. That was remarkably stupid. "Worth a shot," Zoe said through split lips. "Was it? Now you're restrained, injured, and I'm significantly less inclined toward mercy." Yuna descended the stairs slowly, heels clicking against concrete. "I was going to let you make a phone call to Seo-jun, convince him to cooperate, but perhaps hunger and isolation will make you more compliant." "He won't negotiate. Not with you. He will. Because the alternative is getting you back in pieces." Yuna's expression stayed pleasant, conversational. "I've done this before, Zoe. Held leverage, applied pressure, watched powerful men crumble when their weakness was properly exploited. Seo-jun is no different." "You don't know him at all. I know he's been trying to reach you for 3 days. That his second-in-command is stalling him with false information while we consolidate our position. That he's getting desperate, making mistakes, revealing exactly how much you matter." Yuna tilted her head. "That's more than enough." The guards dragged Zoe back to her cell. This time they left the zip ties on, hands bound behind her back, adding a dimension of helplessness to the darkness when the door slammed shut. Zoe sat with her back against the wall, wrists screaming, and tried to breathe through panic that wanted to overwhelm her completely. 3 days. Seo-jun had been looking for her for 3 days while Min fed him lies, while Yuna positioned her pieces for whatever endgame she'd planned, while Zoe rotted in a basement with no way to signal she was even alive. The zip ties cut into her skin every time she moved. She worked them anyway, twisting her wrists, testing the plastic's tolerance. Pain was temporary, captivity was worse. Hours passed. Or minutes. Time had stopped meaning anything. Then voices outside the door, urgent, arguing. Korean she couldn't understand, but the tone was clear. Something had changed. The door opened. Not Yuna this time. One of the guards moving fast, yanking Zoe to her feet. "Come on, now!" He cut the zip ties with a knife that looked wickedly sharp, then shoved her toward the door. In the hallway, chaos. Men moving with weapons drawn, radios crackling with urgent communication, the specific energy of a location being evacuated. "What's happening?" Zoe asked. No answer. The guard pushed her up the stairs through the warehouse level. Outside, black SUVs idled with engines running. He threw her into the back of one, climbed in after her. The convoy moved fast, leaving the warehouse behind. Through tinted windows, Zoe caught glimpses of industrial buildings, then highways, then the unmistakable skyline of Manhattan appearing in the distance. They were going back to the city. And based on the guards' tense expressions and constant radio chatter, something had gone very wrong with Yuna's careful plans. The SUV stopped outside a building in Chinatown. Nondescript, commercial, the kind of place that could be anything. They dragged Zoe inside, up service stairs to the third floor. An apartment that had been converted to something else. Maps on the walls, computer equipment, the infrastructure of a temporary command center. Yuna stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, speaking rapid Korean. When she saw Zoe, her expression went arctic. "Bring her," Yuna snapped at the guards, then returned to her call. They pushed Zoe into a bedroom that had been stripped to bare walls and a single chair. Tied her to it, properly this time, rope instead of zip ties, secured to the chair frame in ways that made movement impossible. Then they left her alone. Zoe tested the bonds. Too tight. Too well done. She wasn't getting out of this one through strength. Through the thin walls, she heard Yuna's voice rising. "I don't care what he's threatening. We have her. He either negotiates or I start sending him pieces." A crash. Something being thrown against a wall. Then silence. Minutes crawled past. Zoe's shoulders screamed from the angle of her bound arms. Her wrists had gone numb. Dehydration made her head pound. But she stayed alert, listening, cataloging everything. The door opened. Yuna entered, followed by two guards and a man Zoe didn't recognize, older, 50s, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of cold calculation. "This is her?" the man asked in perfect English. "This is her," Yuna confirmed. "The reason Seo Jun-han threw away a multi-billion-dollar alliance." The man studied Zoe like she was livestock at auction. "She's nothing special." "That's what I thought. But apparently she's special enough that he's currently tearing apart 3 boroughs trying to find her." Yuna's smile was sharp. "We moved her just in time. He hit the warehouse 20 minutes after we left." Zoe's heart kicked. Seo Jun was out, was looking, was close. "So what's the play?" the man asked. "We use her to force the marriage negotiation back open. He signs the original terms, merges his operation with ours, and she goes free." Yuna gestured at Zoe dismissively. "Or he refuses, and she becomes an object lesson in the cost of emotional decisions." "And if he comes here?" "He won't. Min's feeding him false locations. By the time he figures out where we really are, we'll have moved her again." Yuna pulled out her phone. "I'm going to call him now. Let him hear her voice. Make sure he understands what's at stake." She dialed. Put it on speaker. The phone rang once before Seo Jun answered. "Where is she?" His voice came through rough, strained, barely controlled. "Safe. For now." Yuna's tone was pleasant, conversational. "Want to hear her breathe?" She held the phone toward Zoe, who stared at it, then at Yuna, then made a split-second decision based on 26 years of surviving impossible situations. "Don't do it," Zoe said clearly. "Don't give her anything. I'm not worth—" Yuna slapped her hard enough to snap her head sideways. Blood filled Zoe's mouth. Through ringing ears, she heard Seo Jun's roar of rage. "You fucking touch her again!" "Then negotiate." Yuna's voice stayed calm. "Original terms. The marriage, the merger, full integration of operations. You have 12 hours to agree, or I start removing pieces of her you'll miss. I will burn your entire family to the ground. I will salt the earth where you stood. I will—" Yuna hung up, looked at Zoe with something between respect and fury. "That was stupid. Probably." Zoe spat blood. "But he needed to know I'm not playing hostage." The older man laughed. "She's got spine. I'll give her that." "Spine doesn't matter if she's dead." Yuna turned to her guards. "No food. No water. Let her think about consequences." They left. The door locked. Zoe sat tied to the chair in an empty room, tasting copper and fear in equal measure. But Seo Jun knew she was alive, knew she was fighting. That mattered more than the pain radiating from her face or the exhaustion threatening to drag her under. She'd bought time. Now she just had to survive until he found her. Hours passed. Zoe drifted in and out of consciousness, head lolling against her chest, wrists long past feeling anything. Her mouth was so dry, her tongue stuck to her teeth. The room spun when she tried to focus. Voices outside. Urgent. Moving fast. The door burst open. Min stood there. Seo Jun's second in command, the man who'd supposedly betrayed him. But his expression wasn't that of a traitor. It was fury wrapped in military precision. "Where's Yuna?" he demanded of someone behind him. "Third floor, but—" Min was already moving. He crossed to Zoe, producing a knife that cut through her restraints in 3 efficient strokes. She collapsed forward. He caught her, lowering her to the floor. "Can you walk?" he asked in Korean accented English. Zoe tried to stand. Her legs buckled. "Not far." "Doesn't need to be far." He lifted her, easily, like she weighed nothing, and moved toward the door. In the hallway, 2 men lay unconscious. More of Min's team appeared, securing the corridor. "I thought you betrayed him," Zoe managed. "That's what Yuna was supposed to think." Min's smile was razor sharp. "Seojun and I have been planning this extraction since the day you disappeared. Every false lead I gave him was a location we'd already cleared. Every hour I bought was another piece of intel on Yuna's operation." They hit the stairwell. Gunfire erupted above them, sharp cracks that echoed off concrete. Min's team returned fire, holding position while he carried Zoe down. "Seojun?" Zoe asked. "Coming. He wanted to hit them when they moved you again, but you forced his hand with that phone call." Min kicked open a door to the ground floor. "Couldn't wait after hearing what they'd done to you." Outside, the night was chaos. Black SUVs blocked both ends of the street. Men with automatic weapons held perimeter positions. And in the center of it all, climbing out of an armored vehicle with murder in his eyes, was Seojun. He saw her. Everything else disappeared. Seojun crossed the distance at a run, taking Zoe from Min's arms with shocking gentleness. His hands shook as he cradled her face, cataloging damage: split lip, bruised cheek, rope burns around her wrists. "I'm okay," Zoe said through swollen lips. "You're not." His voice broke. "You're bleeding, dehydrated, hurt because I wasn't fast enough. You found me. That's what matters." Above them, more gunfire. Yuna's remaining security making a last stand. Seojun barely glanced up, trusting his team to handle it. "Get her out of here," he told Min. "Medical team is standing by at the safe house." "What about you?" Zoe asked. His expression went cold. "I'm finishing this." Seojun, "She took you, hurt you, threatened to cut pieces off you." His hands tightened fractionally on her shoulders. "I'm going to make sure she understands what happens when people touch what's mine." "Don't kill her, please." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Why not?" "Because I need you to be better than what she thinks you are." Zoe's hand found his face, forcing him to look at her. "Because revenge doesn't end anything. It just creates more bodies." For a long moment he stared at her. Then he kissed her forehead, her cheek, her mouth, gentle despite the violence radiating from every muscle. "Get her safe," he told Min. "I'll handle the rest." Min carried Zoe to a waiting SUV. She watched through the back window as Seo-jun entered the building, flanked by his team, moving with lethal purpose toward whatever confrontation waited on the 3rd floor. The SUV pulled away. Chinatown disappeared behind them. Zoe slumped against the seat, every part of her body screaming, consciousness threatening to slip away. "Stay awake," Min said from the front. "Medical's 10 minutes out." "Is he going to kill her?" Zoe asked. Min met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Do you want an honest answer?" "Yes." "Then yes. Probably. Unless she's smarter than I think." He turned his attention back to the road. "But that's not your burden to carry. You survived. That's what matters." They drove through Manhattan streets that looked surreal after days of darkness. Lights and people and the ordinary chaos of a city that had kept moving while her world collapsed. The safe house was in the financial district, anonymous among the glass towers. Inside, a medical team waited, doctors, equipment, efficient hands checking her vitals, while Min reported to someone on his phone. Zoe let them work, too exhausted to care about the IV in her arm or the antiseptic burning her scraped palms. "Dehydration, contusions, rope burns, possible mild concussion," one doctor reported to Min. "But nothing permanent. She was lucky." Lucky? Zoe almost laughed. Lucky meant not getting pieces removed. Lucky meant Seojun finding her before Yuna's 12-hour deadline expired. Lucky meant surviving long enough to see him walk through that door covered in someone else's blood. She must have dozed, because the next time she opened her eyes, weak sunlight filtered through blinds and Seojun sat in a chair beside her bed, staring at nothing. "Hey," Zoe said hoarsely. His head snapped toward her. He was at her side immediately, one hand carefully finding hers on top of the blanket. How do you feel? Like I got tied to a chair for 8 hours. She studied his face, exhaustion carved into every line, dried blood on his collar, knuckles wrapped in fresh bandages. Is she dead? No. Did you want her to be? Yes. His voice was flat, empty. But you asked me not to, so I didn't. What did you do? Dismantled her father's entire East Coast operation in 6 hours. Seized assets, burned infrastructure, made it clear that touching you was the most expensive mistake their family ever made. His hand tightened on hers. Yuna's alive, but everything she built is gone. And your alliance? Dead, permanently. They'll spend the next decade rebuilding what I destroyed last night. His eyes met hers, dark and unreadable. Was it worth it? Sparing her? Zoe thought about this darkness, the fear, the moment she told him not to give Yuna anything. Yes, because you proved you could choose mercy even when every instinct screamed for blood. Mercy. He said the word like it tasted foreign. I haven't felt merciful in 4 days. I know, I heard it in your voice on that phone call. She shifted, wincing at the pull of muscles that had been held too long in bad positions. But you listened anyway. That matters. He kissed her knuckles carefully, avoiding the bandages. I thought I'd lost you. Thought I'd have to live with the fact that knowing me got you killed. But you didn't. I'm here. Barely. If Min hadn't gotten inside their operation, he stopped, jaw clenching. I'm not going to apologize for what I did to them, for the violence or the destruction or any of it. I'm not asking you to. But I need you to understand something. Zoe struggled to sit up. He helped her, adjusting pillows with surprising gentleness. I can't live in your world if every threat means you burning cities. If every time I'm in danger, you become something I don't recognize. Then what do you want from me? Control. The kind you had on the train. The kind that makes you dangerous because you choose your battles instead of reacting to every provocation. She caught his face between her bandaged palms. I fell for the man who slept on my shoulder, not the one who destroys everything when he's scared. Seojun closed his eyes. That man was asleep. This is who I am awake. Then figure out how to be both, or I can't stay. The ultimatum hung between them, brutal and necessary. When he opened his eyes, something had shifted in them, pain maybe, or the beginning of understanding. I don't know if I can, he admitted. Then we figure it out together. Zoe's thumb traced his cheekbone. But I need you to try. Need you to believe that power without control is just chaos. And if I fail, then we both walk away before it destroys us. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. But I don't think you will. I think you're capable of more than everyone, including yourself, believes. He kissed her, soft, careful, tasting like desperation and hope in equal measure. When they broke apart, his hands were shaking. I'm going to need help, Seojun said quietly, to be what you need, to not become my father. Then get help. Talk to someone. Learn how to process violence without perpetuating it. Zoe's voice softened. I can't fix you, Seojun. I can only love who you choose to become. And if who I become isn't enough, then at least we tried. They sat like that for a long time, her bandaged and exhausted in a bed that smelled like antiseptic, him blood-stained and terrified beside her. Two broken people trying to figure out if their jagged edges could fit together without cutting deeper. Eventually Min knocked, entering with food and updates. The Park family was in retreat. Yuna had disappeared, probably to Singapore or Hong Kong, where her family still had connections. The police investigation into Seojun had stalled, evidence mysteriously disappearing, witnesses recanting, the whole thing collapsing under its own weight. Claudia? Zoe asked. Safe. Under protection. She's been crying for 3 days, thinks she got you killed. Min's expression softened slightly. Want me to tell her you're alive? I'll tell her myself, later. Zoe looked at Seojun. What about your organization? Your people? Loyal. Min weeded out the actual traitors while playing double agent. Seojun's hand found hers again, an anchor point. We're stable. Stronger, actually, now that everyone knows what happens when they come at my people. At me, you mean? At you specifically, but the principle holds. He stood, moving to the window. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan, painting the towers gold. I need to handle some things. Consolidate, rebuild, make sure this doesn't happen again. How long? A week, maybe 2. He turned back. But I'm not leaving you alone. Men will coordinate security. Medical team stays until you're recovered. Anything you need, you ask. I need to go home. My actual home. Your apartment's been compromised. Yuna's people knew where you lived. Then I need a new apartment. One I choose, that I pay for. Zoe held his gaze. I'm not becoming a kept woman in your safe house, Sojun. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. Equals, he repeated. You're recovering from captivity, and I'm running a criminal empire. How are we equals? Because you need me as much as I need you. Because power doesn't make you better than anyone. Because I won't survive in your world if I lose myself to it. She pushed back the blanket, ignoring medical team protests. So either we figure out how to do this right, or we end it now before it kills both of us. Sojun stared at her, this exhausted waitress with rope burns on her wrists, demanding equality from a man who'd spent his entire adult life having people defer to him. Then he crossed the room, knelt beside her bed, and took her hand. Okay, he said. Teach me. Teach you what? How to be equal with someone. How to love without controlling. How to protect without imprisoning. His voice dropped. Because I don't know how, Zoe. I've never learned. But I want to. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Raw and vulnerable in ways that probably terrified him more than violence or death or any of the dangers his life contained. We start with communication, Zoe said. You tell me before making decisions that affect me. I tell you when I'm scared. We figure out boundaries together instead of you deciding what I can handle. And when threats come, we deal with them together. You don't hide danger from me, and I don't expect you to be someone you're not. She squeezed his hand. But you promised to try choosing strategies over scorched earth, precision over destruction. I can try. That's all I'm asking. Min cleared his throat from the doorway. Boss, we have a situation. Sojun's entire body went tense. What kind? The kind where Yuna's father just requested a face-to-face meeting. Says he wants to discuss terms. Terms? Sojun laughed without humor. After kidnapping Zoe, after threatening to dismember her, he wants terms. He knows he lost. This is him trying to salvage something before you destroy what's left. Min's expression stayed neutral. Question is whether you meet him or finish what you started. Sojun looked at Zoe. Your call. My call? You're the one who got hurt. You decide if we end this with negotiation or obliteration. It was a test and an offering simultaneously, giving her real power in a world that usually stripped it from everyone. Zoe thought about the darkness, the zip ties, Yuna's cold smile promising dismemberment, thought about the man kneeling beside her bed, trying to learn mercy despite every instinct screaming for revenge. Meet him, she said finally, but on your terms, your territory, with clear understanding that if they ever come near me again, negotiation ends permanently. You sure? No. But I'm trying to be better than my worst impulses. You should too. Sojun stood, something like pride crossing his face. Set it up, he told Min. 2 days from now, my restaurant in Tribeca. Make it clear this is a courtesy, not weakness. Min nodded and left. Sojun turned back to Zoe. You need rest. Medical team wants you monitored for another 48 hours minimum. Then stay with me. She caught his hand before he could pull away. Not hovering, not guarding, just stay. He did. Climbed carefully onto the bed beside her, arranging himself so she could rest against his shoulder the way he'd once rested against hers. His heartbeat was too fast, his muscles too tense, but he was there. And for the first time since the warehouse, Zoe felt something like safety return. Tell me a story, she said drowsily. I don't know any stories. Make one up, something not about violence or empires or danger. He was quiet for so long she thought he'd refused. Then, once there was a man who forgot how to sleep. He spent years moving through a world that demanded he stay awake, stay vigilant, stay ready for the next threat. And he got good at it. The not sleeping, the constant war, the transformation of himself into something sharp enough to survive. His fingers traced patterns on her arm, gentle despite the bandaged knuckles. Then one night on a crowded train, exhaustion won, and he woke up 4 stops later on a stranger's shoulder, feeling safer than he had in years. His voice softened, and he realized he'd been awake so long he'd forgotten what peace felt like, forgotten it was even possible. "How does it end?" Zoe asked. "Don't know yet. They're still figuring it out." She fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, and for the first time in days, the darkness didn't feel like drowning. 2 days later, Zoe insisted on being present for the meeting with Yuna's father. The medical team protested. Min looked skeptical. Seo-jun tried to talk her out of it 3 separate times. But Zoe had spent enough of her life being invisible, letting other people make decisions about her survival. If this negotiation was happening because of her, she was going to witness it. They dressed her in borrowed clothes, black pants, simple sweater, nothing fancy. Concealer covered the worst of the bruising on her face, but the rope burns on her wrists were still visible. Good. Let them see what their actions cost. The restaurant was closed to public, secured by so many guards it felt like a military installation. Seo-jun's team controlled every entrance, every sightline, every possible angle of attack. Nothing was being left to chance. Park Jin-woo arrived exactly on time, older than his daughter, 60s probably, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of carefully controlled fury. 2 bodyguards flanked him. Yuna wasn't there. They sat across from each other at a table set for 4. Seo-jun, Zoe, Park, and one of his advisors. The silence was hostile. "You wanted terms," Seo-jun said flatly. "Speak." Park's eyes flicked to Zoe, assessing damage. "My daughter acted rashly, emotionally. This is acknowledged. Your daughter kidnapped someone under my protection, held her for days, and threatened to torture her." Seo-jun's voice stayed level. "That's not rash. That's calculated violence. And your response destroyed 15 years of infrastructure, cost me $400 million in seized assets, burned relationships with every family from here to Los Angeles." Park leaned forward. "So let's not pretend only my side committed sins. The difference is, I can justify every action I took." Seo-jun's hand found Zoe's under the table, squeezing once. "Can you?" Park's jaw worked. Finally, "No." The admission seemed to cost him. His advisor shifted uncomfortably. In the kitchen, Seo-jun's guards waited with weapons ready in case this went sideways. "So what do you want?" Seo-jun asked. "Peace. Cessation of hostilities. Acknowledgement that the alliance is dead but territory disputes don't need to escalate into full war." Park glanced at Zoe again. "An assurance that no further retaliation is coming. That depends. On? Whether you can guarantee your family never comes near her again. Whether Yuna understands that if I see her in this country, I won't show mercy a second time. Whether you're prepared to lose everything you rebuilt if this terms agreement is broken. You're demanding total capitulation." "I'm demanding you understand consequences." Seo-jun's voice dropped. "You tried to use her as leverage. Instead, you proved exactly why emotional connections can be the most dangerous thing in this business. Because now I'm willing to burn everything to protect her. Does that sound like weakness to you?" Park stared at him. Then, surprising everyone, he laughed, sharp and bitter. "You've become your father." "No," Seo-jun said quietly. "My father would have killed you all and called it strategy. I'm giving you a chance to walk away. That's the difference." The negotiation lasted 2 hours. Terms were hammered out with brutal precision. Territory divisions, operation boundaries, clear lines neither side would cross without triggering open war. Park agreed to everything, because the alternative was watching his remaining empire crumble, while Seo-jun picked it apart piece by piece. When it ended, Park stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. "She's going to destroy you," he said, nodding at Zoe. "Not through malice, just by existing, by making you care more about one person than the whole apparatus. That's how empires fall, Han, one human connection at a time." "Then I'll fall knowing I chose something worth keeping," Seo-jun replied. Park left. The restaurant emptied. Security swept the building one final time before standing down. Zoe and Seo-jun sat alone at the table, surrounded by empty chairs and the weight of everything that had just been negotiated away. "He's probably right," Zoe said. "About?" Me destroying you. Seojun turned, taking her face in his hands. Then destroy me. Burn it all down. I don't care anymore. He kissed her forehead, her cheek, her mouth. I spent 4 years building an empire that left me empty. You make me feel human again. That's worth any cost. Even if the cost is everything you've built? Especially then. They left the restaurant as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the city in shades of gold and shadow. The same streets where they'd met. The same subway where everything started. But nothing was the same, and they both knew it. Outside, cars waited to take them back to the safe house. But Seojun stopped on the sidewalk, looking at Zoe with an expression she'd never seen before. Something between fear and hope and reckless certainty. Come with me, he said. Where? Anywhere. Everywhere. Away from this city for a while. His hand found hers. Let me show you what life looks like when we're not running from threats or negotiating with people who want us dead. I have work. I have nothing that can't wait. Nothing more important than figuring out if we can actually survive each other. Zoe looked at him, this dangerous man who'd dismantled empires to find her, who'd learned mercy because she asked, who stood on a Manhattan sidewalk offering her the world despite having every reason to walk away. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay. Show me what normal looks like in your world. His smile was genuine, unguarded, the expression of someone who'd forgotten how, until she reminded him. They got in the car, left the city behind, and for the first time since that crowded subway ride, neither of them looked back. They drove north until the city became memory, just lights shrinking in the rearview mirror while highway stretched ahead into darkness. Seojun handled the wheel himself, no driver, no security convoy, just the two of them in a car that cost more than most people's houses. Zoe watched his profile against passing streetlights, trying to reconcile the man beside her with everything that had happened in the past 2 weeks. Where are we going? She asked after an hour of silence. A place my mother used to take me. Before she left, his hands tightened on the wheel. Before everything became about the empire. You never talk about her. Not much to say. She married my father thinking she could change him, spent 10 years realizing some people can't be changed, then disappeared one morning when I was 12. His voice stayed flat, factual. Smart woman. Should have left sooner. Did you ever see her again? Once. When I was 16 and starting to understand what my father really was. She looked at me like I was already lost. He glanced at Zoe. Maybe she was right. You're not lost. No? The question carried weight. I just destroyed an entire criminal network because someone hurt you. I threatened to burn cities. I became exactly what Park said I'd become. My father, with different justification. Your father wouldn't have asked me what I wanted. Wouldn't have chosen mercy when I asked for it. Zoe's hand found his on the gear shift. That's the difference. They drove in silence after that, trees thickening on both sides of the highway, until civilization felt like something they'd imagined. Eventually, Seojun turned onto a smaller road, then a dirt path that wound through forest so dense the headlights barely penetrated. The cabin appeared suddenly, small, weathered, tucked against a hillside with a view that probably looked spectacular in daylight. Seojun killed the engine. For a moment they just sat there, listening to the woods settle around them. Last chance to change your mind, he said. To decide this is too complicated, too dangerous, too much weight for someone who just wanted to get home on a Tuesday night. Zoe looked at the cabin. This place he'd brought her, this fragment of his past he was offering without armor or explanation. I'm not changing my mind. Why not? Because I'm tired of being invisible. Because you see me. She turned to face him fully. And because for all the violence and chaos and impossible situations, I've never felt more alive than I do when I'm with you. He kissed her then, desperate and careful and tasting like relief. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I don't know how to do this, Seojun admitted. How to be with someone without controlling everything. How to love without weaponizing it. Then we learn together. Zoe's thumb traced his jaw. Starting now, starting here. They went inside. The cabin was sparse. 2 rooms, a fireplace, furniture that had seen better decades. But it was clean, stocked with basics, clearly maintained even if rarely used. Seojun built a fire while Zoe explored, finding books on shelves and photographs in drawers. A younger version of him with a woman who had his eyes, both of them smiling like happiness was still possible. "That's her," Seojun said from behind her. "The last good day I remember having." Zoe studied the photo. The boy in it looked open, unguarded, not yet carved into something sharp. "What happened to that kid?" "The Empire ate him." He took the photo, setting it back in the drawer. "My father started his training a week after that picture was taken, teaching me that kindness was weakness, that trust got people killed, that the only thing that mattered was power and the will to use it." "Do you believe that?" "I used to." He moved to the window, staring out at darkness. "Now I don't know what I believe, except that I'd rather be weak with you than powerful alone." They spent the next 3 days in that cabin, cut off from the world in ways that felt both liberating and terrifying. No phones, no business, no empire demanding attention or enemies plotting revenge. Just two people trying to figure out if the connection forged in crisis could survive normalcy. Zoe learned things about him she'd never have guessed. That he cooked surprisingly well, that he read philosophy at 3 a.m. when nightmares made sleep impossible, that he'd once wanted to be a teacher before inheritance demanded otherwise. Seojun learned that she sang off-key in the shower, that she'd never been outside New York State, that her favorite book was a battered copy of poetry she'd found in a subway lost and found and kept for 7 years. They talked about everything except the question hovering over them. What happened next? On the 4th morning, Zoe woke to find Seojun already up, standing on the cabin's small deck with coffee steaming in the cold air. She joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Tell me what you're thinking," she said. "That this isn't real, that we can't stay here forever hiding from reality." He gestured at the forest. "That eventually we have to go back, and I don't know if what we built here survives in Manhattan. So we figure it out, make different choices." Zoe leaned against the railing beside him. "You said you wanted to be more than what your father made you. Prove it." "How?" "Start by not going back to the same patterns. You have an empire, fine. But maybe it doesn't have to be built on violence and fear." She held his gaze. "You're smart enough, connected enough, ruthless enough to pivot into legitimate business. Money laundering operations become investment firms. Protection rackets become private security. It's been done before. By people who got arrested or killed. By people who tried to do it while staying in the criminal world. What if you actually left?" The idea had been forming for days, but now it crystallized. "What if you took the resources, the connections, the intelligence network, all of it, and built something that doesn't require you to threaten people to survive?" Seojun stared at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. "You're asking me to abandon everything my family built." "I'm asking you to transform it into something that doesn't destroy everyone who touches it." Zoe's voice softened. "Including yourself." "That's a 10-year project minimum. Massive risk. Every enemy I've made would see it as weakness." "Then prove them wrong. Be more dangerous legitimate than you ever were criminal." She took his coffee, sipped it, made a face at how bitter he liked it. "Or keep doing what you're doing and watch it consume you the way it consumed your father's." The challenge hung between them while morning light filtered through the trees. Finally, Seojun laughed, rough and surprised. "You're asking me to rebuild an empire from the ground up." "I'm asking you to choose what kind of legacy you want to leave." Zoe handed back his coffee. "And who you want to be when you look in the mirror. And if I choose wrong, if I try to go legitimate and it destroys everything, then at least you tried to be better than your worst version." He kissed her forehead, lingering there. "You're either the smartest person I've ever met or the most naive." "Maybe both." They went back inside, made breakfast from supplies that were running low, and talked about logistics with the kind of serious focus usually reserved for military operations. Seojun had resources, offshore accounts, legitimate business fronts, connections in finance and tech that could provide framework. The transition wouldn't be easy or fast, but it was possible, if he wanted it badly enough. "I'll need help," Seojun said, sketching plans on paper they'd found in a drawer. "People I trust who understand both worlds. Legal counsel that doesn't blink at where the money came from. Time to consolidate without looking weak." You have Min. He's been with you how long? Since the beginning. Saved my life twice. Never asked questions. Sojun's pen stilled. But asking him to walk away from the only life he's known, ask him anyway. Maybe he's as tired as you are. That afternoon, Seojun made a single call on the cabin's ancient landline. The conversation lasted 40 minutes, mostly in Korean, Zoe catching only fragments. When he hung up, something had shifted in his expression. Min's in. Says he's been waiting 3 years for me to wake up. Sojun sat down hard on the couch. He also said I'm an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Seeing what? That the Empire was killing me, that I'd become a ghost running on autopilot, surviving but not living. He pulled Zoe down beside him. Apparently everyone close to me noticed except me. And now? Now we plan, we transition, we figure out how to dismantle a criminal organization while building something legitimate in its place. His hand found hers. And we do it together because I'm not capable of major life changes without someone forcing me to stay honest. I'm not moving into your world, Seojun. I'll be part of it, but I need my own life too. What does that look like? Zoe had been thinking about this for days. I go back to school, finish the degree that I started and couldn't afford to continue. Find work that matters, not just survival jobs that pay rent. She squeezed his hand. And I keep the apartment I'm going to find, my space that you're invited to but don't control. You're setting boundaries. I'm setting boundaries, she confirmed, because if I lose myself to your gravity, we both drown. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, we do it your way. You keep your independence, I work on not being a controlling asshole, and we figure out how to build something that doesn't require one of us to sacrifice everything. That's all I'm asking. They stayed in the cabin 2 more days, planning and talking and learning how to exist together without crisis driving every decision. On the 6th morning, Seojun's phone, which he'd finally turned on to coordinate with Min, exploded with messages. What is it? Zoe asked, watching his expression darken. Yuna, she surfaced. He scrolled through texts. Singapore. Giving interviews to business press about the volatile American markets and how her family's strategic repositioning was planned all along. Let her spin it however she wants. It's not the spin I'm worried about. He showed her a photo attached to one message. Yuna in an expensive restaurant, sitting across from men Zoe didn't recognize. She's already rebuilding, making new alliances. So you destroyed her father's empire and she's starting her own. Sounds like she learned from you. Zoe studied his face. Does that bother you? It should. But honestly, he set down the phone. I'm just relieved she's far away and focused on something other than revenge. You think she's done? I think she's smart enough to know coming at me again would be suicide. The Park family learned that lesson expensively. He pulled Zoe close. But I'll keep watch anyway. Some enemies stay enemies. They drove back to Manhattan that afternoon, arriving as the sun set over the city that had birthed and nearly destroyed them. The skyline looked different somehow, less threatening, more like possibility waiting to be shaped. Min met them at Seojun's apartment, bringing files and updates and the kind of exhaustive strategic planning that came from decades of experience. They spread documents across the dining table, legitimate business fronts, lawyers who specialized in complex asset transfers, timelines for dissolving criminal operations while maintaining enough presence to prevent power vacuums. This is going to take years, Min said, scanning their plans, and make us vulnerable during the transition. I know. Sojun's hand found Zoe's under the table. But staying the same will kill me slower. I'd rather die trying to be better. Dramatic, Min said dryly. But I'm in, on one condition. Name it. When we're done, when this empire is rebuilt into something clean, you let me retire. Buy a boat. Drink expensive whiskey without wondering if it's poisoned. He looked between them. I'm 53. I've been in this life since I was 20. I want out as much as you do. Deal, Seojun said immediately. When this is finished, you retire with enough money to buy a fleet. They worked until midnight, building framework for an impossible transition. When Min finally left, Zoe and Seojun sat in the resulting silence, surrounded by papers that represented years of work ahead. Second thoughts? Seojun asked. Constant terror, Zoe admitted. But no second thoughts. Good, because I'm terrified too. The next morning, Zoe started apartment hunting. Not in Seo-jun's building, not in his neighborhood, somewhere in Brooklyn that felt like hers. Affordable enough that she could manage rent without his help, close enough to the subway that invisibility was still possible when she needed it. She found it 3 days later. A fourth-floor walk-up in Prospect Heights with decent heating, neighbors who minded their business, and a bodega on the corner run by a woman who knew everyone's coffee order. Nothing fancy, just space that belonged to her. Seo-jun helped her move in, him and Min and 2 guys from his security team who carefully pretended not to be security while hauling boxes. The apartment looked even smaller with them in it, but Zoe loved every cramped inch. "This is really what you want?" Seo-jun asked, looking around at the peeling paint and ancient appliances. "I could get you something better, something without radiators that sound like dying animals." "This is perfect." Zoe unpacked books onto shelves that wobbled. "Because it's mine. Because you don't have keys unless I give them to you. Because I can kick you out when you're being insufferable." "When, not if." "I've met you, it's definitely when." He smiled, genuine and unguarded. Fair point. They spent the afternoon making her apartment livable, hanging curtains, assembling furniture from boxes, arguing about where things should go with the kind of comfortable bickering that suggested permanence. When evening came, they ordered pizza and ate it sitting on her floor because her table hadn't arrived yet. "Tell me something true," Zoe said, sauce on her chin, exhausted from moving. "Like what?" "Like what you're really afraid of, under all the control and strategy." Seo-jun was quiet for a long time. Then, "That I'll fuck this up. That I'll slip back into old patterns and wake up one day to find you've left because I became my father after all." He set down his pizza. "That choosing to be better won't be enough." "It's enough that you're trying." Zoe wiped her chin with a napkin. "Nobody expects perfection, just effort and honesty and the willingness to fail without giving up. And if I fail anyway, then we deal with it, together or apart, depending on how badly you fail." She crawled across the floor to where he sat. "But I don't think you will. I think you're stronger than you know." He kissed her, tasting like pizza and possibility. Outside, Brooklyn moved through its evening rhythm, sirens and music and the ambient chaos of people living their lives. Inside, 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way sat on a bare floor and tried to believe that broken things could be rebuilt into something better. 2 months passed. Seo-jun dismantled operations with surgical precision, moving assets into legitimate holdings while maintaining enough presence that rivals didn't mistake transition for weakness. Zoe enrolled in community college, taking night classes in literature while working part-time at a bookstore that paid minimum wage but let her breathe. They saw each other 3 or 4 times a week, dinner at her place, movies at his, Sunday mornings in coffee shops where nobody recognized them. Learning how to be together without crisis forcing their hands. Learning that normal was harder than danger because normal required showing up consistently even when drama wasn't pushing them together. They fought sometimes. About his tendency to make decisions without consulting her. About her habit of downplaying danger when his enemies occasionally tested boundaries. About whose turn it was to cook or whether his security detail really needed to lurk outside her building. But they also laughed. Talked until 3 a.m. about everything and nothing. Built the kind of steady foundation that only came from choosing each other daily instead of dramatically. Claudia came back into Zoe's life slowly, bringing apologies and therapy receipts and a genuine effort to rebuild trust she'd shattered. They met for coffee once a month, carefully navigating friendship that had been weaponized against both of them. "I fucked up," Claudia said during their 3rd meeting. "Massively, unforgivably. You were scared, made bad choices under pressure." Zoe stirred her coffee. "I've made plenty of those myself recently. But you didn't sell me out to people who wanted to kill your boyfriend." "No. But I fell for someone who made me a target, dragged you into it, and didn't see the danger until too late." Zoe met Claudia's eyes. "We both fucked up. Question is whether we move forward or stay stuck in it." "Forward," Claudia said quietly. "If you'll let me." "I'm letting you." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement that survival sometimes meant making impossible choices, and judgment wasn't useful when everyone involved had scars. 6 months in, Seo-jun's transition was halfway complete. Half his operations legitimized, half still existing in gray areas that would take years to fully clean. But progress was visible. Fewer late-night emergencies, less violence, more time spent in boardrooms than basements. "How's it feel?" Zoe asked one night, lying in his bed while he read beside her. "Like walking away from a burning building. Relieved but terrified it'll collapse before I'm clear." He set down his book. "Min says we're past the point of no return, that even if I wanted to go back, too many bridges are burned." "Do you want to go back?" "No, but I miss the simplicity, the clear rules. Violence has grammar. You attack, I defend, someone wins. Business is messier." He turned to face her. "People lie differently in boardrooms. Harder to see threats coming. Welcome to how normal people live, where danger doesn't always carry weapons." "I hate it." "I know, but you're doing it anyway." "Because you asked me to." "No," Zoe corrected, "because you wanted to be more than what you were. I just gave you permission to try." He kissed her shoulder. Semantics. Accuracy. They lay in comfortable silence while the city hummed beyond his windows. After a while, Seo-jun's breathing evened into sleep, the kind that came easier now, though nightmares still occasionally dragged him awake at 3 a.m. Zoe stayed awake, thinking about the past 8 months. The subway ride that started everything. The gallery where she'd watched him choose her over empire. The basement where she'd nearly died. The cabin where they'd decided impossible things were worth attempting anyway. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Still alive, still watching, still impressed. Why? Zoe stared at it. Yuna. Checking in from whatever new empire she was building on the other side of the world. Not a threat exactly, just a reminder that some connections didn't sever cleanly. She deleted the message without responding. Some ghost didn't need feeding. A year after that first subway ride, Zoe woke in her own apartment to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She'd fallen asleep reading, book open on her chest, Seo-jun's side of the bed empty because he'd had an early meeting with lawyers about the final asset transfers. Her phone showed a text from 2 hours ago. Finished early, bringing breakfast. Don't burn the apartment down trying to cook. She smiled. Asshole, but her asshole. The key turned in the lock, the one she'd finally given him after 4 months of him very carefully not asking for it. Seo-jun entered carrying bags from the bakery she loved, already dressed for the day in jeans and a sweater that made him look younger than 30. "You're wearing normal clothes," Zoe observed. "I'm a legitimate businessman now. We wear normal clothes." He set down breakfast. "Also, Min said if I showed up to one more meeting looking like a mafia boss, he was staging an intervention." Smart man. They ate on her couch. Still slightly wobbly, still secondhand, still perfectly hers. Seo-jun told her about the meeting, about assets finally cleared for transfer, about the last major criminal holding being dissolved into a legitimate security firm. Zoe told him about her midterm exam, about the essays she'd written on invisible narratives in modern literature, about the bookstore possibly promoting her to shift lead. Normal conversation, normal problems, normal morning. "I have something for you," Seo-jun said after they'd finished eating. "If it's expensive, it's not." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Open it." Inside, keys, not to a building or car, smaller, older, attached to a tag that read cabin, both names. Zoe looked up, confused. "The cabin upstate, where we figured things out." Seo-jun's expression was carefully neutral. "I had the deed transferred to both our names. Equal ownership. So it's not mine that I'm lending you. It's ours that we share." "Seo-jun, you said you needed space that belonged to you. I'm trying to understand that while also—" He stopped, frustrated. "I'm trying to do this right. Give you commitment without control. Show you I'm invested without making you feel owned." Zoe turned the keys over in her palm. Such a small thing. Such a massive gesture from someone who'd spent his entire life owning everything and trusting no one. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're not angry?" "Why would I be angry?" "Because I made a big decision involving you without asking first." "You're learning." She kissed him. "Slowly, but you're learning." They spent the rest of the morning in her apartment talking about everything and nothing. About plans for Thanksgiving, her suggestion, his terror at meeting what little family she had. About Min's retirement plans. Apparently he'd bought that boat. About Seo-jun's nightmares, which were lessening but not gone. And Zoe's occasional panic when men in suits stood too close. Damage didn't disappear. It just became part of the landscape you learned to navigate. Around noon, Seo-jun's phone rang. He glanced at it, expression darkening. "What?" Zoe asked. "Park Jin-woo, Yuna's father." He showed her the screen. "First time he's called since the peace terms." "You going to answer?" "Should I?" "Your choice. But I'm curious what he wants." Seo-jun answered on speaker. "This is Han." "Han!" Park's voice came through clear, formal. "I'm calling to inform you of my retirement. My son is taking over the family operations, what remains of them. I wanted you to hear it from me directly." Silence. Then Seo-jun said, "Thank you for the courtesy. I'm also calling to say you were right." Park's voice shifted, losing its formal edge. "About choosing something worth keeping over empire. My daughter understands strategy. My son understands people. He'll build something better than what I destroyed trying to control everything. Good luck to him. And to you, Han. I hear you're transitioning to legitimate business. That takes courage most of us don't have." A pause. "Maybe in another life, we could have been allies instead of enemies." "Maybe," Seo-jun glanced at Zoe. "But this life worked out the way it needed to." The call ended. Seo-jun set down his phone, staring at nothing. "You okay?" Zoe asked. "Yeah, that felt like closure, like the last thread from the old world finally cutting loose." "Is that good or bad?" "Good, I think. Means I'm really done, really moving forward instead of keeping one foot in the past." He stood, pulling Zoe up with him. "Come on, let's go outside. I'm tired of talking about empires and violence." They walked through Prospect Heights holding hands like normal people, stopping at the bodega for terrible coffee that Zoe loved and Seo-jun pretended to tolerate. The woman behind the counter knew them now, the tall Korean guy and the short white girl who came in most Sundays, clearly together but maintaining separate apartments like sensible adults. "You two getting married or what?" the bodega owner asked while ringing them up. Zoe choked on her coffee. Seo-jun handled it with more grace. "Maybe someday," he said easily. "Right now we're figuring out how to not kill each other." "Smart. Marriage is hard enough without rushing it." She handed back change. "But you're good together. Don't screw it up." Outside, Zoe was still coughing. "Marriage?" She asked. I answered honestly. Seo-jun studied her reaction. "Does the idea horrify you?" "No, just, we've never talked about it. We've been busy not dying and rebuilding our lives. But eventually we'll need to talk about future instead of just surviving present." He squeezed her hand. "Not today, but someday." "Someday," Zoe agreed, and found she didn't hate the idea. They walked through their neighborhood while afternoon settled into evening, past the bookstore where Zoe worked, past the coffee shop where Seo-jun held legitimate business meetings, past the subway entrance where it all started, now just another piece of infrastructure instead of a monument to impossible connection. "Tell me something," Seo-jun said as they paused at the corner. "If you could go back to that Tuesday night, knowing everything that would happen, the danger, the kidnapping, the violence, all of it, would you still let me fall asleep on your shoulder?" Zoe thought about it, about the basement and the zip ties and the moment she genuinely thought she would die, about the fear and chaos and impossible choices, but also about the morning coffee and shared books and Sunday walks with someone who saw her completely. "Yes," she said, "I'd do it again. Every terrible part. Because the alternative is staying invisible forever. Even knowing what it cost? Especially knowing what it cost, because now I understand what I'm worth." She turned to face him fully. "And so do you." He kissed her there on the corner while the city moved around them, indifferent, endless, full of people finding each other and losing each other, and sometimes, impossibly, building something that lasted. When they broke apart, the light had changed 3 times. Someone behind them honked. Seo-jun flipped them off without looking. "Very legitimate businessman of you," Zoe observed. "I'm still learning." "I know, but you're getting there." They crossed the street together, heading toward Zoe's apartment where they'd order takeout and argue about what to watch and fall asleep tangled together on her too small couch. Tomorrow, Seo-jun would go back to dismantling what remained of his criminal empire. Zoe would go to class and work and continue building a life that belonged entirely to her. But tonight, they were just 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, survived impossibilities together, and decided that broken things could be rebuilt stronger than they were before. The subway rumbled beneath their feet, constant, reliable, full of people going home. Somewhere on those trains, someone else was probably falling asleep on a stranger's shoulder. Maybe that would change their life too. Maybe it would mean nothing. Either way, the city kept moving. And so did they. 3 years later, Zoe stood in the same subway station where it all started, waiting for a train that was running late. She'd finished her degree, was working as a writer now, documenting invisible narratives for a nonprofit, had published an essay about survival and visibility that went viral in literary circles. Her phone buzzed. Text from Seo Jun. Meeting ran late. See you at home? Home. They'd finally moved in together 6 months ago. Not his place or hers, but something new they'd chosen jointly. An apartment in Brooklyn with enough space for both of them to breathe. The train arrived. Zoe boarded, finding a spot near the center pole. The car was crowded with Tuesday evening commuters, everyone trapped in their own worlds. Across from her, a young woman in a waitress uniform clutched a worn bag, eyes glazed with exhaustion. She reminded Zoe of herself at 26, invisible, surviving, carrying weight nobody saw. The train lurched forward. An apple rolled from the young woman's bag, coming to rest at Zoe's feet. She picked it up, offered it back. Their eyes met. For one moment, Zoe saw everything that woman was carrying, the exhaustion, the fear, the specific loneliness of surviving in a city that never noticed. Saw herself 3 years ago, before danger and love and impossible choices rewrote her entire existence. "Thank you," the young woman said quietly. "You're welcome." Zoe handed over the apple. "Hang in there, it gets better." "Does it?" Zoe thought about everything she'd survived. About the man waiting for her at home, who'd learned to love without controlling, who transformed his life because she'd asked him to be better. About the scars they both carried and the future they were building despite them. "Yeah," she said. "It really does." The train moved through the tunnel, carrying them all toward whatever came next. The woman clutched her apple. Zoe held on to the pole. Around them, the city breathed and moved and continued being exactly what it had always been. Impossible and indifferent and occasionally, unexpectedly, the place where broken people found ways to be whole. When Zoe got home, Seojun was already there, cooking dinner in their kitchen, humming off-key to music she'd gotten him into. He looked up when she entered, smiled that unguarded smile she'd spent years earning. "How was your day?" he asked. "Normal? Exhausting. Perfect." She kissed him. "How was the meeting?" "Boring, legal, everything I never thought I'd be grateful for." He returned to chopping vegetables. Min called. His boat broke down in the Caribbean. He's living the dream. Good for him. They made dinner together, talking about their days, about weekend plans, about the ordinary maintenance of lives that had stopped being defined by survival. After eating, they collapsed on the couch, Zoe reading while Seojun reviewed contracts, comfortable in shared silence. Around midnight, Seojun's phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced at it, expression unreadable. "What?" Zoe asked. "Yuna, getting married. Some tech billionaire in Singapore." He showed her the article. Engagement announcement, photo of Yuna looking elegant and untouchable beside a man who radiated money and control. "How do you feel about that?" Zoe asked carefully. "Relieved. Means she's moved on. Built something new instead of staying stuck destroying the past." He set down his phone. "Good for her, honestly." "You mean that?" "I mean it." He pulled Zoe closer. "She taught me an important lesson about cost-benefit analysis in personal relationships. Turns out some things are worth more than empire." "Like what?" "Like this. Normal Tuesday nights with someone who makes me want to be better than my worst version." He kissed her temple. "Like building something that doesn't require anyone to get hurt." Zoe settled against him, listening to his heartbeat, steady, calm, the rhythm of someone who'd learned to sleep without fear. Outside their window, Brooklyn moved through its endless cycle. Inside, two people who'd survived impossible things sat together in the quiet, grateful for ordinary moments that once seemed unattainable. "Tell me a story," Zoe said, echoing words from years ago. "I don't know any stories," Seojun replied, echoing himself. "Still? After 3 years?" "Fine. Once there was a man who forgot how to sleep." His hand traced patterns on her arm. He spent years running an empire that consumed everything until someone showed him a different way. How does it end? He learns to rest without one eye open, learns that safety can be built through trust instead of violence, learns that the most dangerous thing he ever did was choose love over power. His voice softened, and he spends the rest of his life grateful for that choice. That's a better ending than the first time. That's because we're living it instead of just surviving it. They stayed on that couch until exhaustion won, neither of them wanting to break the spell of ordinary happiness. Eventually, they stumbled to bed, tangled together in sleep that came easily now. And somewhere deep in the city, a subway train rattled through dark tunnels, carrying strangers who might be about to change each other's lives, or might just be going home after exhausting days. Either way, the city kept moving, and so did everyone brave enough to stay.